Just days ago, his father died. His mother died of illness when he was still a child, and he felt no warmth toward the rest of his family. He had no girlfriend or close friends. It seemed there was no reason or strength to stay in this world until new thoughts came. I never imagined life could change so suddenly. Just a few minutes earlier, a man of medium height in a black suit stepped out of the building, his dark hair lifted by the breeze, and he sighed with relief that the painful event was finally over, though a sad awareness settled in that it is hard to grieve alone, and he thought about how much his father must have suffered when saying goodbye to his mother. He walked along the road with a small group as dozens of cars rushed past, their horns honking without end. Night had already fallen, but the streets were still full of people. Lost in thought, he felt his loneliness as a 27-year-old bachelor from Hachioji with no family, friends, or lover. He had been so busy lately, he barely noticed life passing, moving through it numb and sometimes repeating his name in his head, flat. He always returned to his parents' home, hoping his father would meet him there. And then a silhouette of his father appeared, greeting him warmly, calling him Kurito and saying he had come back home again, while the young man leaned on the bridge railing and bowed his head, thinking he would never feel his father's warmth again. And he remembered that his paid leave ended today, though he had asked for a half day, when his phone suddenly rang in his pocket with a message from his manager, who complained that his absence had completely upset him and asked him to skip the funeral. And the manager warned firmly that he had to be at work tomorrow because no more days off would be allowed this year or his pay would be cut. After reading the whole message, he laughed helplessly at the memory of his manager mocking him, seemed indifferent to Kurito losing his last family member, admitted he was tired of life and everything around him, felt he did not belong in this world and wanted to leave it all behind to find a place where he could live comfortably. A voice came from behind, promising there was a being that could help him, and terrified, he cried out, trying to make out whose voice it was, when a strange seal with a bright glow appeared under his feet, leaving him even more stunned. He found himself in a completely different world with a medieval atmosphere, where old houses, charming streets, and a majestic castle on the far horizon formed a scene that left him speechless. Turning around, he saw strange creatures and asked aloud what they were and where he had gone. Then a voice explained he was in another world, the very place he had dreamed of reaching. Fiorito, amazed, again remarked on the wonder of that world. Chris repeated that he had given him the chance to go to a distant land where he could live freely of his own choosing. And the man, unsatisfied with that explanation, shouted to make everyone understand the true meaning of his words, but his loud voice drew a crowd of whispering people around him, and then he realized it had all been an impossible fantasy. Longing for another place, he was stunned by meeting a different world. Relief came with the knowledge that he was free of worries, no longer tied to a shady job and other troubles, and he finally knew it was time to step away from the crowd's watchful eye and find shelter at the roadside. A thought came to him that moving on would help him come to his senses faster. Fear would not leave him while he stayed still, and at that moment he felt complete confusion. Ferredo did not know how to get home and realized he could do nothing about it, yet honestly, he did not really want to go back. As he walked down the street, he watched his surroundings carefully, trying not to attract attention and planning to find a place to live. But when he looked around, he realized the world felt like a game, because all kinds of creatures appeared nearby, from elves to strange lizards. He realized he had played a similar fantasy game before, and regardless of the world, money was needed. So the real task was to find a way and a place to get it. As he walked, he noticed all eyes on him because his bright outfit clashed with the medieval world, where such colors and shapes were not allowed. He decided immediately to sell the clothes and buy ones that matched local standards. Fortunately, he was already near a clothing shop. On entering the shop, he almost immediately met a short, gray-haired man who ran up to him eagerly, smiled, greeted him warmly, called him a nobleman, and asked which clothes he would like to buy today. Curator was surprised when he was mistaken for a nobleman. He explained he wanted to sell the clothes he had been wearing. The merchant examined the garment closely, noting the fabric was excellent and the workmanship skilled. Still, he insisted on asking if the young man was sure about his decision. Curator chose to stay silent, thinking that would avoid being cheated. Later, he confirmed he would sell the clothes and asked the price. The merchant replied that the fabric and the garment were flawless and set the price at 40 gold coins. Curator could not hide his surprise and began to doubt the offer. Realizing he knew nothing about this world's money system, the young man hesitated. And when the seller saw he was thinking, the seller offered 45 gold coins, but the young man said he needed time because he did not understand these matters. So the seller agreed, raised the price to 50 gold coins, and assured him no other shop could offer better terms. And the young man fell back into thought. Having really hoped so, he accepted the stated price, thanked the seller, and asked for help choosing summer clothes for the city, and the seller gladly agreed. Stepping onto the street in his new look, he was pleased to see he had bought only the bare essentials, spending 5 silver and 5 copper coins. After a moment's thought, he realized he could learn the new language and read it easily without effort. The mysterious voice's words replayed in his mind, reminding him that Kirito had no reason to worry. He decided to check it later just in case. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted when someone shouted to him. A girl approached him, lightly tugged his cloak, and offered to sell him flowers. He answered with a surprised question, but quickly came up with a great idea. A great opportunity hit him immediately, and he agreed to buy flowers, which surprised her and made her smile. But his real plan was to ask her for something, and she, smiling, agreed on condition that he buy the flowers first, and then she would answer any question, while he thought about how stubborn she could be, like a child. He asked how much the flowers cost, and the girl said they were only 2 silver coins. With small hands, he handed her the coins, and she thanked him. Kirito smiled and asked if she would answer his question, and she agreed. A thought ran through his mind that the question was strange and not very important. At that moment, the boy realized he could not ask an adult about this, so holding out a coin, he asked how much it was worth. The girl, surprised, asked what he meant, and he said her story could help him a great deal because for him it was a matter of life and death, and in the end, she agreed and explained the value of each coin in detail. He realized the whole world ran on money and even converted his money into Japanese yen. By Japanese standards, he had 494,480 yen. Not rich, but a decent starting point for a fresh start. The girl smiled at him again and asked if there was anything else he wanted to know about her. He decided to ask the name of the town they were in, and the answer surprised him. It was Zerl, the capital of the kingdom of Ardies. Those names were unfamiliar to him, which did not surprise him. Then he asked if she had heard of the country Japan, but she mixed up the letters and said she had never heard of it. Realizing he was truly in another world, he asked one last question about where to find work. A smile bloomed on her face, and then she asked seriously, "You are not unemployed anymore?" He remembered being called uncle at 27. explained he was a traveler who had just arrived in town. The girl paused, then suggested he try guild adventures if he needed work. And when Goran asked what the guild was, she said it assigned tasks and paid for completing them. She explained that a man could earn money by killing various monsters and, with a light sweep of an invisible sword, reminded him that her father had told her about it. Kirito noted she had probably inherited traits from him, which she agreed to. A thought flashed through his mind that in this world he could not afford to be unemployed. Joe asked her to show where that guild was, and she smiled and agreed. They walked the narrow alleys of the small town and reached a house on a wooden foundation with a sign of crossed swords by the door. Entering the building, he saw tall men in armor whom he thought of as steadfast. Trying to act casual, he felt like he was passing a group of gopniks sitting by the shop. Then someone greeted him with a warm welcome. A creature that radiated years of experience appeared before him and said, "The Adventurers Guild is at your service." It wore a uniform with the guild's insignia. Kirito looked her over, wondering if her ears were real. She immediately asked what he was doing. He looked away and said he wanted to be an adventurer, trying not to stare at her because he felt a long, close look was rude. She smiled, agreed, and suggested they sign up with the guild, offering to help him learn how it works. Kirito smiled back and said that help would be welcome. He began explaining that every adventurer has a rank from S to F that rises as they complete more quests, and higher ranks bring tougher missions and larger rewards, so only a few reach the top S rank, which gives them great influence and opens the door to missions issued directly by members of the royal family. After joining the guild, every adventurer receives an initial rank and a starting skill level. At first, you can take tasks like finding lost items, making deliveries, or cleaning the town. As your rank rises, you unlock chances to fight monsters, gather rare materials, and take escort missions. And over time, tougher, more interesting tasks become available. Working in a group with the guild leader's approval let him take on higher-ranked assignments. The girl encouraged him to aim for promotion and explained that violence, theft, and murder were strictly forbidden in the guild. After hearing this, Kirito realized it was only the bare minimum of information. They all smiled and explained she had already told him everything he needed to know, as long as he did not change his mind about joining. Registration required an entry fee of 5 silver coins. Aware that more questions would come up, he agreed and took out an unusual crystal. The girl asked him to press his hand to it. When he asked what it was, she said it was a crystal that stores adventurers' information and explained that each guild keeps such spheres to exchange data. Fiorito found it very handy but stayed curious about how they worked. Lowering her eyes and apologizing, she said she could not talk about it, and he apologized for asking inappropriate questions. Then she asked him to hold his hand over the ball to gather all the needed information, and Fiorito complied at once. Descriptions began appearing around the boy, each revealing different details about him. They said all the information was already available. The girl began to read, but when she saw the title, Fruit Kirito, she asked, with mild surprise, what it meant. Kirito, an F-rank human, mastery, cosmic magic. The girl read the description carefully and could not hide her surprise. She decided to consult a senior guild member. Miss Lumen explained that a newcomer had arrived who knew the skill Cosmic Match and asked if the elder was familiar with it. The elder, surprised, said it might be linked to water, fire, and other elements. He appeared in the form of a beast, apologized, and asked whether he should inform the guild's chief representative, and the older girl said the chief was on a business trip. Kirito asked if she could continue the registration, and the girl consulted the guild leader about the next steps. The leader said he was on a business trip and could not give instructions. Kurito insisted she had not broken any rules because the guild charter had no clause banning registration of an adventurer with unusual magical abilities. The girl in beast form confirmed this and continued the registration. Everyone showed a token, proving the boy had officially joined the Rang F adventurers, and the girl explained that completing tasks would free him from official duties, and that if he lost the token, he would have to pay 3 silver coins. Dorito nodded, turned to leave after receiving the registration confirmation, but she asked if he wanted to take the first task, and he said he would start as soon as he was fully prepared. Walking down the street, he decided to test his magic. At the nearest corner, where barrels stood, a quick motion of his hand and a spoken spell split one of them in 2. He reached forward, said, "Distortion," and instantly created a dark void inside the barrel. He expressed admiration for the mastery over space, noting it was amazing while hinting it might be warped. Earlier, touching the crystal had given him knowledge of spatial magic, though true magic that could affect space did not exist. In fact, such power should not exist because it could destroy everything in its path. Someone who had this power could become very dangerous, though that was not certain. Realizing the being that brought him here had given him this power, he wondered what its purpose was in gifting such dangerous magic and sending him into this world. And since he was not given a specific mission, like in computer games, he remembered the words about moving between places, thought about what that could mean, and standing in front of the house, decided to try the magic by picturing its roof to see if he could travel through space that way. He materialized on the roof, causing great surprise since he had only imagined teleporting before. Not wasting time, he moved to a spot with an even more stunning view and vanished from the previous roof at the same moment. A sudden move put him on the balcony of the tallest building. He breathed a sigh of relief and admitted that while it had been frightening, it was worth it in the end. A breathtaking panorama unfolded before him, enchanting in its grandeur. His father suddenly appeared before him. He remembered his father's advice not to live only for work, that life belongs to everyone, and each should live their dreams. Kurito bowed his head sadly, eyes half closed, to realize that this world will no longer have skyscrapers, cars, or trains, or any place for the company he hated, or for shallow, awkward relationships. A voice reminded him he could go wherever he wanted and live by his own rules, and he saw that as the best choice. Looking ahead, he chose a life where he was the master of his fate. He kept looking at the evening view, where a few houses already glowed with lights, while most residents were heading home and only faint music came from a few taverns in the distance. About his father and the mysterious voice, he said firmly, they were right. Use this magic to live a full, happy life. It could put him anywhere. His abilities reached an incredible level, and he was convinced he had found the best way to secure his place in the world. Early that morning, he decided it would be his first day on the job, and when he reached the guild, he immediately started his first task, even though it was only a routine delivery. Expecting only a few tasks, he was surprised to learn there were 5, and the registrar warned that so many tasks were almost impossible to finish and that late completion could lead to a fine. But he felt confident, and she stuck to her decision. He had just called F because he only needed to clear small tasks with him. And in this world, people rode horses while spatial magic carried the real weight in a career. He showed no interest in monster hunting tasks. Despite spatial magic's power, not long ago, he had been just a lowly clerk, handling delivery sheets. The client's house was in the southern district, while the delivery had to be made in the eastern district. After leaving the guild, the curator glanced back and remembered the balcony on the tall tower. He immediately teleported there and found the view stunning. Teleportation had one single drawback. Fortunately, teleportation worked only to places he had already seen, so he climbed higher to scan the area and find a precise spot to teleport to, and once he reached the new location, he realized it would always be available as long as he could imagine it. From above, he scanned the area and immediately recognized the house he was looking for. With a clear picture in mind, he walked straight to it. After knocking, he greeted the occupant politely and said he was a traveler. An elderly, short man with grey hair opened the door, and Kuruto thought he might be Mr. Brown. With a warm smile, Kuruto said he had a delivery, and the man said he was pleased by how quickly the order was completed. Brom pointed to the two chairs and offered to have them taken to his granddaughter. Kuruto smiled and nodded, and the old man wished him a safe journey. Mr. Brown then stepped up to the chairs, extended his right hand, and spoke the spell, Spatial Storage. A dark circle appeared instantly beside him, and he tossed a few chairs into it. Surprised by how smoothly the magic worked, he thought of himself as a real cheat. It reminded him of an inventory in a computer game, but he decided to think about that later. Outside Mr. Brahm's granddaughter's house, he knocked and said he had a parcel to deliver. A woman's voice from behind the door said she would open it in a moment. A little girl with a charming face then stood before him. After reading the note, he said he had brought 2 chairs at Mr. Brahm's request. The girl smiled with joy because the chairs had belonged to her grandfather. She explained the chairs were quite heavy and she had not expected them to arrive so quickly. She added that an adventurer like him did not seem as strong as he looked, and Kurito laughed awkwardly. She was thrilled because the delivery arrived so quickly, and Fiorito remembered how he had once taken everything for granted, while his boss kept pushing him toward new tasks. Receiving sincere thanks felt good, but it was time to move on, so he said goodbye to the girl and left. Several days later, after completing many successful tasks, he returned to the guild, which buzzed with chatter and cheerful laughter, and the girl behind the counter noticed him and called him over. He stepped up to her and immediately forgot her name, and she said angrily that he should not have forgotten it. Calling herself Kushi, she explained she handled Mr. Kurato's affairs and asked him not to repeat the mistake. It crossed his mind that her manner reminded him of a guild elder. He could not believe he had finished the task so quickly, so he decided to show how his cosmic magic worked. This world had never seen such sorcery, but after weighing the pros and cons, he chose it as the best option. The girl was stunned, unable to accept that he had completed everything in just 15 minutes and insisted it was impossible. Finally, Furedo demonstrated his magic, and the surprised girl fell silent and thought. Realizing how serious the situation was, he asked her why she had summoned him. She explained the situation and suggested he leave the royal capital. Shocked, Kurito asked why she was making that offer. Her reply was that he had worked tirelessly and had nearly finished all his tasks, but she feared the time was coming when low-ranking adventurers would have no way to earn a living. Hearing this, Kurito awkwardly apologized with a sheepish smile. Working outside the capital, he could take as many jobs as he wanted. The idea of working beyond the kingdom's walls really appealed to him. Memories came of monsters living far from the city that attacked people. Even though his magic was clearly powerful, he still felt some fear. Kushi interrupted his thoughts and said that if he agreed, she would focus her attention on him. In addition to raising his pay, he promised to recommend him for a promotion. She replied with an ironic laugh that the higher the rank, the higher his salary, and after weighing the pros and cons, Kurito agreed and she thanked him, admitting that the words promotion and pay raise swept through her like an explosion. Outside the capital, a majestic view opened before him, with tall mountains, green meadows, and a bright sun that slightly dazzled him. Spotting a single road outside the wall, he headed for the horizon. Thanks to a guild token and a mission, he could explore the land beyond the city for free and enjoy adventures that were both exciting and useful. He realized he could picture the place and travel there by magic. A small note hidden in his wallet showed the delivery address as the village of Goran. Realizing the letter meant little, and the money carried heavy responsibility because the task was much harder and required more time and physical effort, he concluded it was probably a test for promotion, and the village name made him think again. A cool breeze gently brushed his face, and the fine weather created perfect conditions for work. Confidently, he took in the amazing view that opened before him, something he had never seen in his life. Breathing out with relief, he moved toward his goal without hesitation. Using the teleportation spell, he moved on down the road, noting how much faster it was than traveling by carriage. One thing, however, remained unexplained. The village of Goran was quite far and would take a long time to reach, and when he heard the birds singing, he looked up and immediately realized that the higher you climb, the wider the view, so he decided to try to reach a bird's height. Appearing instantly at the right height in the sky, he was surprised to find he had reached his goal, but soon realized he was beginning to fall. Without wasting time, he aimed at the next point in the sky and moved quickly toward it. Smiling, he confirmed the method was effective and continued on his way. While flying, he realized he was really airborne and even sang a familiar tune, but strange non-human voices suddenly cut him off. Looking down, he saw several goblins, a guild target he had only heard about before, and Kushi had insisted this route had almost no monsters, so it was unclear whether he had been lucky or she had misled him. Applying offensive magic, he targeted only the barrels, not intending to fight the creatures, but curiosity got the better of him, so he landed nearby, and immediately drew their attention, and the green goblins with twisted faces began to roar at him. Seeing it as a great chance to practice, he braced himself as 3 goblins instantly lunged at him, roaring, and Fjord, focused, reached out his hand and cast the spell Riz. 3 goblins fell to the ground, split in 2. The other goblins did not accept this fate. They instantly rushed the man, loudly shouting in their goblin tongue. Kurito immediately cast the spell Distortion. Both goblins instantly spun into a spatial vortex and scattered to different corners of the glade. Breathing with relief, the boy said he had handled them. When his gaze landed on the grotesque, he noticed that the longer he stared, the more frightening and distorted it became. Realizing he had never killed an animal before, he felt a slight guilt. Reason told him there was no moral wrong, but the pull of magic made him certain the thing before him was an enemy. He remembered the cockroach and resolved to keep that image in his mind. Ironically promising to cut off his own ears for destroying monsters, he continued fighting the goblins. Outside, night was coming, and the sun slowly sank below the horizon. At dusk, he reached the village of Goran. The small settlement was surrounded by a brick wall and had only a handful of houses. Many buildings were lit, but few people lived there. As they reached the gate with the guard, a middle-aged man with light stubble and a spear in his hand appeared. He looked closely at the boy and, surprised, asked about the traveler. And in the youth's mind, the man seemed friendly because he corrected the guard and said he was an adventurer from the royal capital on an important mission, which impressed the guard since coming from the capital to this village on a mission was unusual. The guard asked what the mission was, and the man answered that he had been sent to deliver money and letters. Then, when the guard asked who had sent them, he read the name Mr. Greg and Taylor from the letter. Gran said he understood who was meant, and explained that since they became adventurers, they no longer returned to that village called the Man Mr. Curio, and added that they regularly send money to support that wild area, and the other man only nodded in surprise. Truly a cheerful man, he asked his companion to ask the guard to escort him to his destination, but the guard said he was in no hurry because the sun was already setting, and explained he would make the delivery tomorrow. Knowing it might seem rude to bother people during dinner, he did not care because magic could bring him back here the next morning. Nodding in understanding, he ran through the area in his mind again, memorizing every detail. With an arm around Kurito's shoulder, he cheerfully offered him a place to stay for the night. Kurito, surprised, tried to refuse, but the guard's firm persistence and strong grip made him agree, so he asked them to tell him about the kingdom's capital. The guard and a young man approached a small house surrounded by flowers and plants, and when the guard went inside, he called loudly for the family to come greet him. A young woman with a bright smile and light hair tied in a ponytail came out, greeted him warmly, and welcomed him back. But when she saw Kurito beside him, she was surprised and asked who his companion was. The young man apologized for the trouble, gave his name, and said he was a traveler. She smiled kindly, praised his manners, and introduced herself as Stella, Andre's wife. Then Torito looked up at the guard and asked his name, but the guard only gave a startled refusal as if his name could not be spoken. He smiled, said it was unnecessary, and laughed. His wife noted it was typical of him. The young man apologized and thanked them for letting him stay the night. The guard said he also had to make dinner for Kurito, and she said they should make him feel at home. He apologized again for the inconvenience. Dorito walked slowly down the corridor, taking in the modest house, his first night in such an ordinary home in this world. And as he passed the stairs to the second floor, he heard a cheerful call announcing his father's return, and someone immediately asked about the new client. A girl with large green eyes and light hair, tied in a small ponytail, came down the stairs, wearing an elegant dress that highlighted her eye color and a softly tied scarf at her neck that added a special touch. Andres' daughter, named Nina, was introduced to Chirito. He sat across from her, said he was very glad to meet her, and explained he was an adventurer whose attentive father had allowed her to stay the night with them. Nina smiled at his sincerity and said it was a great honor to meet him. Chirito thought she was sweet and easy to talk to. Then someone suddenly called him. He grabbed Chirino's shoulder and warned him sternly, "Don't even touch my dear daughter." And the startled, frightened young man immediately begged to be let go, but someone quickly grabbed his ear and he soon cried out in pain. Stella demanded he stop talking and help her in the kitchen right away, her harsh words making him understand immediately, and memories of his wife's boundless power flashed through his mind as the father told his daughter that Kurito had arrived from the royal capital, and she looked at him in surprise. A bright light lit her eyes. Surprised and pleased, she looked at the young man and asked again about the royal capital. Filled with delight, she started jumping around him, wondering if he had really come from the royal capital, and she said with excitement that it was incredible and that he probably had many stories to tell, while the young man could barely collect his thoughts from the surprise when a loud voice from behind asked if everything was all right. His wife stepped forward and said the villagers had listened to the traveler's stories with great interest, and they asked him to speak with their daughter, a request he agreed to while thinking about the strangeness of this world. They were invited to sit at the table, where a variety of dishes were laid out, appealing in both sight and smell, and the young couple could no longer hide their delight as they watched the appetizing spread. Father carefully brought out a bottle of wine and offered it to Kurito, who agreed to try it only if it was not too strong. Andre assured him there was no need to worry. Kurito was served a glass into which a deep burgundy wine with a pleasant aroma was poured. He noticed how pleasant the wine's aroma was, without any excess acidity. Andre asked if the man was familiar with winemaking. The man said the winemakers in their village were extremely picky, so their wine was the best. The young man nodded in understanding. They clinked glasses to toast their health and savored the first sip of wine. Kurito said with delight that it had an exceptionally rich, full flavor, and Nina's father confirmed it at once. The daughter suggested trying the salad because the vegetables were fresh from the garden and gave the dish a special taste. Stella encouraged him not to be shy and assured them there was enough food for everyone. Kurito looked at her and thanked her with a smile. Tasting the food, he praised its superb flavor and called Stella a true master of cooking. She blushed and thanked him softly, and Henri added that her cooking skills are the best in the world. Dao remembered his mother, who died too young. He loved the atmosphere of this house. Andre noticed a thoughtful look on his face and asked what was bothering him. But Dao said everything was fine and added how wonderful it was to have a home of his own. Smiling, he told the boy to try on his own, to stop chasing needless adventures and move to their village. And he promised to teach him to hunt, while the boy smiled softly. He watched thoughtfully as life flowed calmly and peacefully in this corner, since a deep night had already settled over the village. In the morning, Haredo will resume his mission in these parts. A mysterious being transported Fadi Kurito to another world to fill its pages, and cosmic magic set him to perform unexpected tasks until he and his family settled in the village of Horan, while morning was just breaking and the first sunbeams slipped through the windows to warm the soft pillow where he dreamed of his past life, when an unexpected kick from someone's foot quickly brought him back to reality. Nina, who had slept much more deeply than he had, woke up. He quickly changed his clothes and went down to the first floor. Smiling Stella was already in the kitchen and cheerfully said good morning. After he said he'd slept well, Kirito smiled warmly and nodded as he gratefully took the pajamas she had brought him. She laughed softly and apologized for how extremely stretchy the outfit was. He asked if her daughter had fallen asleep, and she replied that the little girl was sleeping peacefully and they did not want to wake her. She explained that there were no peers in the village because all the young people had rushed to the capital. Speaking seriously, she said they were having a wonderful time and asked if he himself was not busy with any adventures. The young man, slightly surprised, remarked that they were probably tired of such games, recalling her husband's anger yesterday when Nina wanted to sleep with Kurito to learn more about the royal capital. He then asked whether there were any problems with Androm. Stella only smiled and assured him everything was fine, convincing him the situation was under control. Behind him, a clearly sleep-deprived man appeared and asked who was so worried. The man said Nina was his only daughter, so his concern made sense. Kirito politely wished him good morning and received the same greeting. Ray asked again if he had done something wrong, and Kirito, clearly surprised, said nothing had happened. Stella added that he went out every day for a half-hour check, then saw them off and said breakfast was already ready and waiting on the table. Kirito glanced over her shoulder and was surprised. A tasty breakfast waited on the table, toast with eggs and fresh vegetables that went well together. Fiorito, seeing the spread, rushed to wash up. Outside, The sun was already high in the sky, and a light breeze blew dust along the road. After breakfast, Andrei and Kurito set out to meet the new day. Kurito had to deliver a letter with money to the address Andrei had promised to take him to. He looked around the countryside with thoughtful admiration at its quiet and calm. Kurito said the village was incredibly beautiful and seemed to have stopped in time. Andrei explained that the young people here often find such surroundings boring, because boredom is a kind of luxury people feel in different ways, and he liked the idea and agreed. Again, he remembered his world. It was no surprise because he had felt hopeless there. He never felt the way he wanted while he was there. People do not realize that such boredom can become acceptable if they think about it. Different thoughts flashed through Kurito's mind. He wondered how long it had been since he arrived in this world. Only today did he finally get a real night's rest. Memories of last night surfaced when Nina noted with surprise that the capital was home to so many different races. He added that he also found it striking. She asked him to tell more, but he only sighed and said he had nothing else to say. Her surprised look silently judged his answer. Then he admitted he planned to become a real killer and said he had recently arrived in the capital. People immediately asked where he was from. Farida was surprised by the sudden turn. The young man explained that his home was quite far, which caused some inconvenience, but he considered it the best option for himself, and Nina was surprised to learn about the difficulties caused by the long distance. The girl smiled and said that many exciting adventures now awaited him. At first, Kurito looked surprised and dreamy. Then he gave her a gentle smile and nodded in approval. In his cozy home, Andrei announced they were here and pointed to Greg, who was at Taylor's house. And Greg, surprised, asked whether they were really neighbors, receiving a sarcastic reply that they were a wonderful couple. And as they walked to Andrei's house, he confirmed she would call the family, while Kurito nodded in agreement. A group appeared before Kurito. One man said he was Greg's father, and a woman said she was Taylor's mother. Another man introduced himself as an adventurer named Kurito and warmly wished everyone good morning. He handed over a small pouch and said he had a delivery for them. They hesitated for a moment, asked if it contained money, and the man confirmed it. She said she was surprised because only letters had come before. The man replied that the letter might contain the needed information, so they concluded the message was clear in it. They also noted that although he was an F-rank adventurer, the guild still trusted him completely. To his surprise, he learned the matter involved him and agreed. They explained the guild had recommended him, so they decided to transfer the funds. Someone raised an eyebrow and said we were probably dealing with some kind of lice test. Kurito asked what that meant, but the other person refused to explain and suggested checking whether the full amount had been transferred, and the reply was that by all calculations and the letters, the funds had been transferred in full. The men thanked him for coming such a long way and asked him to pass along their greetings if he met their foolish sons. Glancing back at them, he nodded. Standing outside the house, Andrei asked if the man had finished the task. The man said yes and thanked him for the help. Andrei then asked when he planned to return and was told the work was done and he was getting ready to go. The man nodded and explained he first had to say goodbye to his family. Smiling, he repeated his thanks and said being indebted made him feel even more grateful. The news of Kurito's return clearly displeased him, but he admitted he would like to stay a little longer, and unfortunately, his unstable finances forced him to give up that wish. The girl nodded gently and offered her hand to invite him to return next time, and Kurito answered with a confirming nod. She reached out her hand in response. Andrei approached the man and sternly warned him not to think of harming her, and the man assured him he had no such intention. Andre then decided to test if they understood the age gap and asked the man his age, guessing he was 18. Before Andre could say anything, the man interrupted, saying 18 was far too low and that he was actually 27. He did not look that young. Mina's parents were stunned when they learned Kirito's real age and could hardly believe their ears. He said in surprise that the young man was only 1 year younger than him, and Kirito replied that Andre is 28 and asked why he treated him as if he were the same age, adding that he had always thought Andre much older and had even called him old. And the man fell silent in shock before saying that was very rude. He told the parents that no matter how cute their daughter was, he was not tempted by her, and he apologized sincerely, but that was not true for Andre because Japanese people can sometimes look much younger than their age, and Stella surprised Kirito by offering him her food since he seemed to like it, noting that a few dishes remained from yesterday and sharing them with him. To make sure he would not be left hungry, he thanked her for the food. As they left the house, she spoke to them and thanked them again for their support. Smiling Nina waved goodbye. Andre said he would gladly stay with them next time if needed, and Tiarito also waved goodbye as they walked away. Walking down the road, he remembered how kindly those people had treated the stranger and adventurer, realized they were truly exceptional, and felt that time with them had given him a warm, homely sense of belonging. So he knew that if life remained as varied, visiting them again would be easy. Leaning back and stretching his arms to the sky, he realized it was time to return to the guild and submit the quest. A warm joy filled him, knowing he had found a place that always welcomed him back. After saying goodbye to the family who had offered him a place for the night, he left the village of Goran, where a promotion brought several benefits. The list and number of tasks he could take expanded, saving him time. Quest rewards increased, so he soon earned more than any other adventurer, and his thoughts were suddenly cut short by a strange voice behind him. A group of wounded men appeared before him, and one turned to Kirito, unable to understand how Kirito managed so many tasks because he thought a true adventurer should earn money from combat quests, but that approach hurt his reputation. And when he asked if there was a rule forcing people to take monster-slaying jobs, he was told it did not matter. People like Kirito usually stuck to the easy jobs. He thought hard about what to do, since arguing with someone like that was pointless. Remembering Kushi's words, he realized the guild strictly forbade violence and taking part in conflicts. He realized he would have to enter the building to avoid them. A man twice Kirito's size stepped in his way. The man asked where he was going, reminding him the conversation was not over. People nearby began to notice a scuffle forming around them. A crowd gathered around them, with some loudly talking about the fight and others confidently betting on the winner. Kirito realized he was about to see an incredible spectacle, for fights were common here, and he had seen similar scenes during quests. But now, a brawl had broken out, with both fighters competing for the title of the best. Shadow was already thinking about joining a guild or running away, though neither option would solve his problem. It was clear he could not handle a normal fight, and casting spells like Cuta's distortion in public was out of the question. Then, a brilliant idea came to him. With so many people, his speech against his opponents could be great publicity, and that opened a chance to raise his earnings to a new level. So he recited his speech aloud, but two people came up and asked what he had been muttering, and Kirito snapped that it was none of their business. He said he'd act on his own and wouldn't bow to their demands, and he added, "If you don't like it, try to make me change my mind." His words hit the boys hard, and full of anger, they said they'd do that, and if he thought so, would simply hit him. Feeling like he was already flying, he smiled and asked to continue the conversation, but the others rose into the sky with him, leaving everyone stunned and confused. Remembering he couldn't stay in the sky for long, they began to fall. The boys, terrified, shouted that any moment they could turn into a tiny puddle. Meanwhile, Kurito stayed completely calm, since he was responsible for the process. One of the masked men, frightened and stunned, asked why he was so cold-blooded. Still furious, they decided to ask him whether he had really done it, and he calmly admitted it, adding that falling from that height would turn them into a cake. So, surprised that he might intend to kill them, they desperately begged him not to do it. As they flew closer to the ground, they apologized and pleaded for mercy, and he exhaled, thinking their resolve had weakened. Yet in the end, he spared them. They landed softly with only minor scrapes and bruises, and the onlookers were surprised and asked what had caused their unexpected return, because no one had seen such magic before. Before the assembly, he explained that his magic lets him instantly travel long distances. The skeptical crowd questioned why he would reveal the ability, since it was new to some, and he said he had an idea that would make their journeys much easier. If a destination fell within his range, he would bring them there without difficulty. Most of his income came from taking adventurers to missions and charging for it. In a world without modern transport, those services were in high demand. Negotiating fares directly let him earn even more. He assured everyone the proposal would bring mutual benefit. The neighborhood residents listened thoughtfully, but could not fully grasp the idea. It was their first time facing this approach, and they hesitated, unsure it would succeed. Then someone in the crowd spoke up, prompting an immediate surprised reaction from the speaker. A woman approached him, asking what benefit it would bring them both. He hesitated because someone really seemed interested, then explained that it would save them time and let him earn money by taking them to their destination. And when she asked about the price, he replied that the cost would depend on the distance traveled. For the first client, he set the fee at 2 silver coins to transport the group to the mission. The girl hesitated and said it was too high. He realized his service should cost more than a regular carriage, because with a carriage they would get 2 copper coins back, which made it harder to justify charging them more. A man of average height stepped out of the crowd and said the group Thundersword would like to know more if it is not inconvenient. He smiled and eagerly said he fully supported the idea, but the girl lost her temper and demanded to know their purpose, calling him Rid, while his doubts remained and he continued to think the situation over. Addressing the girl, he said that if it was true, the boys' skills could give their progress a big boost. And after explaining his reasons, he suggested they move somewhere else, because discussing this in the middle of a crowd was not appropriate. He introduced himself as Kuruto, a tall man with several scars who called himself Stone. Alina, leader of the Thunder Sword team, stepped forward first and warned him sharply that if he deceived them, she would not hesitate to take his life. A young girl with a staff then introduced herself cautiously as Anna. Reed smiled and said it was time to get to work. Alina stopped him and asked why they needed to jump. He said it was very simple. He said that if Kuruto guided them to the destination, they could handle many tasks for very little, and when they heard Kuruto's price, they were surprised to learn it was only 2 silver coins. He continued his story. First, these people always travel on horseback or by carriage. If you add up all the costs, it comes to just 2 silver coins. But when things go wrong, the costs rise, and he added that Rox and Alina drink a lot of tea, which is counted as an expense. They calm instantly and give frightened smiles, as if frozen. Reed also asked if they were really worried about how much money was spent, and Purid Oak could only sympathize with them. He continued to explain that if they spent a little silver on travel, it would save time and effort and let them do several high-paying tasks each day, so their income would grow, and they would also not have to worry about monster attacks on the road, which would greatly reduce their burden, and the group members nodded in agreement. She put her hand on his shoulder and smiled as she apologized for being forward. He felt a quick surprise at how fast she had changed her shoes. Reed said they needed to earn more money before other adventurers learned their plan. If things went that way, Ranga would not be far off. Joy over the new goal, Ranga swept them, and they agreed to act at once. A young man had been eavesdropping on their conversation the whole time, secretly watching from around the corner. From around the corner stepped a medium-height person with white hair and a matching cloak, captivated by magic that allows free movement. Sipping a cup of tea in a small, cozy cafe, he enjoyed a moment of calm when his eyes fell on an hourglass, and he realized it was time to go back for the boys from the mission. Drawn by the will of a mysterious being, Fadi Kurito was suddenly transported to another world. Using cosmic magic, he became an adventurer and was invited to join the Sword of Thunder group, departing the royal capital for its destination. Kurito hoped the group was safe and no one had been hurt. However, only a few hours earlier, the situation had been different. The group was stunned that they were here in just 1 second. Reed noted that normally it would have taken them 3 full days to travel that route. Wacken. Fuarito admitted he had already visited the Plain Cows on official business. As explained earlier, his magic could only teleport him to familiar places, so the farther he went, the higher the fee. Reed adjusted his glasses and agreed without hesitation. Because speed mattered, and convinced it was a good deal, he handed the payment to Kurito, realizing transporting people could be a decent income, then decided to start the first mission by gathering materials and planned to spend 2 hours on it. So he asked Kurito how he planned to use that time. He said he'd return to the capital, have a cup of tea, and wait for them. The guys, all except Reed, were stunned, and Reed just looked surprised. They objected, saying they'd be fighting and sweating while he would simply sit back and enjoy his tea. Everyone thought it was a very clever plan. Furedo said that was exactly his talent. But if he went with them, he'd only get in the way, and everyone agreed. She hid behind the boys and wished them luck. Alina, looking stunned, said she had decided to run and immediately grabbed one of the girls, pulling her along. From the way Anna stretched the T sound, it was clear she wanted tea too. They were told to be picked up in about 2 hours. Kurito smiled, nodded, and warned them to be careful. He walked up to the boys, and before he could say he was back, a knife suddenly appeared at his throat, and to his horror, Alina realized it was him and stepped back. Kurito asked her what had happened, saying he had nearly given himself a heart attack, and she blamed him, saying his sudden appearance had frightened her. So he decided to keep his distance in future and asked how the monster hunt had gone, receiving assurance that everything had gone well. Noting that everything had gone smoothly, he pointed to the stone where the bound, stunned monster sat. That was exactly what he had expected from B-rank adventurers. While studying the parchment, he prepared to move on to the next point of the journey, but Reed interrupted him to ask his question. They could leave their luggage with him for safekeeping for an appropriate fee. Behind Reed, a girl named Anna was begging to be taken home. That move would let them gather even more material. Torito thought about the office. Riado realized that the more tasks they completed, the more materials they gathered and the heavier their load became. So a storage system for adventurers could be very useful and profitable. Purito agreed and set the price at 3 bronze coins, and Reed said that would help them a lot. One of the men, surprised, asked for a small standard pouch and was promptly promised it would be provided. Using space magic, he created a storage space for them and said it was ready for materials. Lena and Anna looked surprised and asked how that could be possible. Kirito turned to them and asked what was wrong, since they clearly recognized his amazing abilities even though his magic seemed too powerful. Without wasting time, the guys suggested heading to the next task in the Galore Forest. The trip to the Galore Forest, which would normally take 4 days by carriage, went by in a flash. The Thunderswords returned to the capital the same day, finishing 2 missions at once, something that had seemed impossible before. Laying the earned money on the table, Reed saw the sum exceeded all his expectations. 6 silver coins proved to be a truly worthy reward. Hirito smiled and said he was glad to help, but the rest of the team looked at him with puzzled expressions. His expression showed he already planned to leave them. He apologized for doubting his abilities at first because they turned out exactly as promised. The whole group smiled at his kindness and knew that such a reliable person would be a great addition to the team. Rock suggested inviting him to the group. Alina thought it was an excellent idea, but Kirito refused, explaining he did not intend to remain an adventurer for long. He also said he was always ready to use his skills to help when needed, and his first clients were those who funded the sword and received a discount. He nodded with a warm smile, showing he understood. A moment later, the girl slapped the boy and sharply ordered him not to mention the incident, her satisfied face speaking for itself and making even the stones seem to groan with pain. Everyone agreed to keep working with Kirito. People were already whispering that their return from the mission had been too sudden, saying you must build a reputation before you can earn a name. A few weeks had passed since he began his new job. Doubters of Kirito's skills started coming to him one by one. His client list kept growing and steadied his income, and he soon called his work transfer and service, though he did not know where it would lead. When he entered the guild building, Kusha ran up to him and, annoyed, said the guild was in a state of emergency because of him. The boy wasn't expecting anything, but another girl led Kushi away, and he asked her not to call him that name again, and the girl insisted the second name suggested a chance of adventure, but Miss Kushi disagreed and did everything to get away as quickly as possible. Nevertheless, she resigned and went to him, insisting they slow the transfer of adventurers, because huge demand and the frantic pace of tasks made requests impossible to process on time, and tensions rose, while recently the guildmaster had praised Kirito for his outstanding efficiency and sincerely thanked him for his work. But she remained unhappy and, to show her protest, struck the counter with her fist. The head spoke on, clearly displeased, and insisted everything he had told her be forgotten, because the old man rarely came to the guild and often shirked his duties, so she told Mr. Kirito to listen carefully and warned that such behavior could cause the entire staff to die from exhaustion. A warning clearly meant to intimidate him. And finally, Mr. Kirito said he understood and apologized, and as he left the building, he never imagined things could reach this point. He couldn't force Kushi and the others to work to the limit, since he knew what a corporate slave cost, and it was clear his magic had limits. After moving many groups of people and storing their luggage, he felt fatigue and a drop in mana. So, remembering his break, he decided to use the time to think of new work, when someone spoke from behind, calling him transfer service. A remarkably intriguing figure appeared before him. Kirito greeted her politely and suddenly realized she resembled a Hollywood actor, and after a nod, He asked who she was, and she apologized for behaving inappropriately earlier. Emilio introduced himself as a merchant doing business in the royal capital, with his associate Rodney standing beside him. Fiorito stated his demands, and Emilio immediately proposed a partnership, leaving Fiorito speechless. Apologizing, he said he was not that kind of person and not interested in those topics, so there was no need to impose a point of view. The shocked young man clarified that partnership meant something different to him. Fiorito sighed with relief and admitted he was wrong, and the other man said to just forget it. Emilio offered him a job at his company, and the young man was surprised to be asked to join to handle the transfer. When he got a positive reply, things ended on a pleasant note. Long ago, he assessed his power and even noticed how he instantly reached Obfurist, though a normal wagon trip would have taken about a week and a half, and he said using his ability to buy and sell goods could easily make a profit. A conclusion he probably reached himself. It seemed he had studied Kurito's character closely, his manner meticulous and attentive, which confirmed his claim that he intended to earn money that way. Emilio, pleased, smiled and said how much that simplified things, then asked again about his offer. But Kurito tried to dissuade him, and in the end, Kurito decided to learn the company's name, and Emilio nodded and gave it. It seemed Kurito had already figured it out himself. The company was called Emilio, and he was its director. The other man apologized, saying he had never heard of such an organization before. Emilio, surprised, asked whether he had visited the capital's market. Kurito confirmed he had, and that he had even planned to offer his services there, but the man crossed his arms and said it showed on his face. Kurito, surprised, said that was rather harsh. He was not surprised he had not heard of his company because it was founded only recently. So he checked, thinking his upset probably came from learning how young it was. And the other man said he would soon join a larger firm, to which he gave only a brief confirmation. He confirmed the situation was not bad, but not ideal, warned that working for a large company could be a poor choice. And when Kurito looked at him in surprise and asked why, a detailed explanation followed. For him, joining a large company was an extra burden. The bigger the organization, the more obligations, and the more the profit had to be shared. He said he never joined any group because he feared losing his freedom. Instead, he chose to work as a hired hand, calling it a transportation service. He knew being only a small cog in a big machine was not for him. Kurito wondered who this man was. He watched him closely, and, as he listened to Emilio, learned the company was already far along in the business, despite having only 2 employees. Emilio assured him he would not be forced to work, and that everything would happen at his convenience with good pay. Fiorito asked about distribution channels and was told not to worry because the network was already set up, and when Fiorito asked about startup capital, Emilio only sighed and called him overly cautious. He handed him a bag of 50 gold coins. Chirido thought about how that sum could buy a small house in the capital, since not everyone has such financial means. It was clear Emilio was keeping the truth to himself. Although Chirido said he had his own funds to buy goods, Emilio clarified this was only an advance if he accepted the offer, and Emilio had not expected such a huge monthly sum. He was even more surprised to learn it paid daily. Emilio explained this was all he could expect for now because the volume was modest, but the scale would grow over time, and so would the income. And when Hirito asked if he was confident in his offer, he received a positive answer. Convinced that Kurito Sova's help would greatly increase his profits, he struck a smug pose, and Rodney applauded. He thought about how completely they trusted him, but his thoughts were suddenly interrupted when Emilio asked if he was ready to cooperate. Realizing that Emilio would not take the risk if things went wrong because the offer looked very attractive, he decided it was wiser to start small and grow the company gradually. The man named Emilio showed great interest in him, so he agreed and extended his hand for a handshake. Emilio suggested they drop formalities and use first names, and without hesitation, he accepted, after which both shook hands warmly. Everything is now official. When Kurito stepped outside, he saw Emilio carrying boxes. Kurito greeted him warmly and asked if he was ready to get started, and he nodded. Kurito also said good morning to Rodney, who only nodded briefly. Emilio warned not to take Rodney's indifference too seriously because he is very shy. Emilio then asked if he had slept well, and Kurito said he had slept well. He pointed out that the store was completely empty, and Emilio replied that he had just bought it, but said it would soon be filled to the brim, and other stores would not be able to compete. Turio felt doubts about the situation. Emilio then spoke to the boy to clarify what he wanted to know before moving on to discuss the boy's abilities. Curious about its limits, he asked whether his teleportation magic had a range and how far it could move cargo. He had heard of a magical storage and wanted to see it in action so he could decide where to focus his business resources. Kurito could not understand what the other person wanted, since he had already explained everything in detail. Kurito said he had done a similar study and knew every nuance of his abilities. Emilio carefully wrote in his notebook that Kurito could instantly move anywhere in the world. Even though Emilio knew the question was unnecessary, he still asked Kurito to show his storage, and Kurito agreed without hesitation. Instantly, with a casual wave, a huge black portal opened beside them. The man, curious, asked if storing his goods there would harm them, since Kurito had assured him the place was safe. Kurito said he had often stored not only other people's items, but also perishable food there that did not spoil. Emilio asked how that worked and what kept the products fresh. Kurito gave the example of buying fresh fish at the port and reselling it in the capital. Emilio said the idea seemed promising, but selling such goods in a regular market might fail because people are used to traditional ways. He suggested that by telling the upper classes about the benefits, they could charge higher prices for those goods. Cheetos immediately saw how to maximize profit, showing his sharp mind. Emilio insisted the goods be moved to his warehouse as soon as possible. When Emilio saw the amount of cargo to move, he was stunned. One of the others asked about a wagon, saying they would need to find such transport in every town. Responding to the man's quiet muttering, Emilio sternly warned him not to think the task was impossible. Kurito instantly loads the entire cart into his storage, amazing Emilio and Rodney, assuring them everything is under control and the move will go smoothly. But at one point, Emilio left in a way he was not used to. He stood, stunned, openly showing his surprise, and Emilio wiped his eyes, apologized for laughing, said the magic was truly impressive, and that he had good reason to come closer, while Thuredo realized the laughter showed little goodwill. Emilio explained that his magic would be perfect for transporting contraband. Kurito was very surprised and immediately objected. Emilia, embarrassed, said she was only joking and that they could make good money without that risk. Kurito asked him not to joke like that anymore. After everyone confirmed they understood, Kurito suggested they start working. Donka's darkness spread over the green fields. Happy Emilio couldn't believe they had suddenly arrived here. Kurito wondered if he was getting tired of reacting so emotionally to everything. One man asked why they had come, and the other said he should have known, since he had been here before, while the first added that it was only about work. Standing by the border of Matika, known for its busy trade, he moved to clarify the situation and, curious about the country's goods, asked if his companion knew its main exports. Velcureto said he did, and listed many spices, dried fish, and fine fabrics, and Emilio confirmed this, adding that prices for those items in Donka are almost the same as in Matika, suggesting they can be bought profitably. Du asked why the price was different. Emilio explained that the royal capital side has many mountains and various unwanted monsters. For that reason, merchants and travelers deliberately avoid the village, and almost no one knows about it. Merchants also prefer to pay the toll and go straight to Madden to avoid coming here. The boy understood and nodded in agreement. Last time he delivered the letter, it did not go unnoticed, because Emilio knows many things ordinary people do not, and that worried Kurito a little. Kurito explained their strategy was to buy rare goods cheaply and sell them where they were scarce. Emilio said, "Buy low, sell high. That's the whole point of the business." Still, putting that principle into practice was hard. The man noticed Kurito looking at him in surprise. Smiling, Emilio said his magic would make things much easier. Emilio waved and urged them to hurry with the shopping, since the local market could not compare in size to the Madat one. After they finished trading, they headed to another place. Kurito felt many tasks lay ahead. That was how their business meetings unfolded. Emilio kept his promise, and starting the trading company meant traveling across the country to markets selling food, crafts, textiles, medicines, and rare monster materials. Kurito bought specialized goods at attractive prices to sell where they were most needed. Emilio quickly found needed information and adapted to any situation, and his charm and people skills were a real asset. Kurito barely had time to turn his head as their company grew fast and gained popularity nationwide. Then something happened. In 3 months, the shop became a huge success in the royal capital, and the building was completely transformed as dusty corners and cobwebs vanished, and every corner gleamed with clean brightness. Walking through the city, he thought about the remarkable achievement that in 3 months they had reached this result despite having more employees, and what pleased him most was that only a few employees knew he was involved. The company had grown fast, and people in town said there was no product Emilio and his team could not handle. If they kept pushing, the firm would soon be so stable and reliable that even Kurito leaving would not affect its success. His business instincts still impressed as if he had awakened a kraken, and Kurito knocked softly on the door to warn Emilio he was coming in. The man at the desk, looking through papers without raising his eyes, greeted the visitor warmly by name. Kurito said he had brought goods acquired by Mr. Zam, and the man asked him to place them in the store. He neatly arranged all the goods and said such work could only be done in the Valerio volcano. Emilio tapped a stack of papers on the table and said they could not manage without the young man's help. The young man replied that his magic was no longer needed because he now delivered rare items that were hard to find. Smiling, Emilio asked if he missed the old days when endless shipments, overtime, and crushing fatigue were his routine. The young man asked not to mention the past, and Emilio said that at his salary it was a sin to complain since he earned his money honestly, and that was how it should be. He said plainly that everything was finished, and his cash bonus was ready to be paid. Kurito watched him warily and asked if he was overworked. The man replied that he still depended largely on Kurito, which went against his promise not to tie him down too much. Kurito immediately understood and said he had asked for freedom but warned against overloading him. Emilio smiled and asked if Fiorito was ready to spend his whole life working for the company. Fiorito, surprised, asked when Emilio had remembered that. Emilio said it was a pity, since Fiorito had not planned to devote his whole life to the company. Fiorito inwardly confirmed he had no such plan. Emilio fell silent and thought about what he had heard. Deciding to check whether he had saved enough as the company's profits rose every day, he chose a peaceful life over a high salary, which made Kurito pause. Reato fell silent. He had no words. Emilio said the decision was his, but his aim was to make the company the best in the world, and he would be very happy if Kurito joined. In the evening, some city streets glowed with life from the many pubs. Kurito, passing shops and houses, thought about talking to Emilio because something in his behavior bothered him. Remember when he first found himself in another world and just drifted along, not thinking about the future? His only aim was to make money. And over time, he forgot his original hopes because his true goal was something else. Lost in thought, he accidentally brushed a passerby's shoulder and immediately apologized. Needing to rethink everything, he chose a quiet spot instead of a noisy pub or cafe, and when he looked up, he noticed a stately tower with a cozy balcony. The sight of that balcony, which had captivated him, left him no time to hesitate, and he moved toward it at once. At the same moment, he realized how long it had been since he was last here, all the way back to the very first day of his existence in this world. Remembering the creature's words about using magic, he smiled as he watched the faint stir of life on the night streets. Looking back, he realized that working at the guild or in the transport service had turned out much better than it had seemed. It was there he had met many wonderful people, and even Emilio, despite his eccentricities, had real talent and was an excellent boss. Kodo did not hate his current job, but he had never tried to form close relationships. Losing his mother early made him fear another loss and kept him at a distance from others. When his father later died, he realized he was alone and had no warm ties. He knew he was much better off now than before, though his relationship with Emilio remained strictly business, and thoughts of real friends and deep human bonds filled his mind as the city brought warm memories of home, a place where he could feel true peace and comfort. Nina, the guard's daughter, appeared before him. He remembered how she had asked if he would come back. Moments spent with that family came alive in his memory. The farewell that had warmed his soul once again took on special meaning. In the village called Gore, the family that longed to see it again slowly came alive in his memory with vivid recollections of that evening. The room filled with a joyful mood as people chatted, shared jokes, and laughed, creating a unique sense of celebration. He realized he wanted to settle in the village of Goran and would not mind a quiet life there. Parting from Emilio felt impossible. Help from Kuritos remained indispensable if that were possible. The discovery that space magic let him be in both the village and the royal capital at once stunned him. Facing a future split between two worlds, he grew tired of loneliness and longed for happiness, cherishing human connections and every moment, but he knew the power given to him would not allow that life, so he accepted his choice. The idea of living on two bases and traveling with magic became the very thing he had been missing, and he finally found the life he had always dreamed of. Fudi Kurito had mastered spatial magic that let him move freely. That led him to live a double life, earning money in the grand royal capital and resting in the picturesque countryside. Today's weather was beautiful, and a child's voice filled the main street, carrying a melody through the spring neighborhood as the child picked flowers and wove a wreath. A familiar silhouette appeared on the road, a girl who, despite having only one leg, walked forward with steady confidence. Waving and smiling, he said hello. The girl looked at him in surprise and did not recognize him. Gently, he asked if she remembered him since he had visited the village before. He reminded her they had dined together and that he had stayed the night, and mentioned her interest in stories of the royal capital. The girl remained surprised, and the man, with a sad look, quietly felt upset that she did not recognize him. When she recognized him, joy flooded her, and she started hopping around happily, asking in surprise why he was here, and whether it was because of work again, while also asking how he was doing and offering to spend the night together again, which made Kirito sigh with relief. He lay on the grass and quietly said, "Thank God." Nina noticed him and immediately asked if he was all right, and he confirmed it, explaining he had been here before and feared they had forgotten him. Nina loudly assured him she would never forget. Smiling, he said even her father, Andre, had not forgotten him. He had really only been worried they would forget him, and Nina added that it would never happen. She called the day of his arrival special, smiling as she remembered how much fun it had been, and thanked Kirito for keeping his promise and coming back to them. She said she was the one to thank. When they reached the house, Stella was waiting in the yard and was pleasantly surprised to hear he had returned. Kirito smiled and greeted her warmly, noting how long it had been since they last met. Stella said she was happy to see him again. He had a line he used, pointing at his wife to remind her he had warned her, but she had not believed him. Stella looked down and said there was no work in their village. The young man simply stepped away. Andre asked whether he would stay the night, and Kirito said he would, as long as he did not interfere with their affairs. Stella smiled and said they would have to make a bed. Vina grabbed Kirito's cloak and announced he would sleep in her room, and her father reluctantly said that was unacceptable. She asked the same questions as before, and her father answered with similar words, and Kirito smiled, thinking they had not changed at all. He watched it all with a smile, feeling the atmosphere fill with warmth and comfort. Stella asked Andre if his absence would cause problems since he had left his post. Andre answered confidently that another guard had taken his place from the start, aware that the replacement would be long-term. He felt the village liked him for a reason. Andre asked what he was doing here and whether he had gone off on another double delivery run, but Kirito denied that. He announced he had settled here, which caused surprised looks and questions from them. Andre immediately said it was great news because now they could go fishing together. Nino was delighted at the thought of playing beside him every day. Kirito had not expected such warm hospitality. Stella asked her father and his daughter to calm down a little. She admitted she was happy about it, but explained in detail what was wrong with his work. And Andre joined the conversation, noting that although the style of clothing matched, the fabric quality was much higher, and asking about his business and affairs in the capital. Kirito said he earns money trading and does not intend to give it up. And Andre listened with interest, as he added that it is impossible to do business here, so he plans to keep working in the royal capital. Stella and Andre looked at him, surprised and a little doubtful, and Kirito calmly said he understood their mistrust, but added that, as incredible as it sounded, his magic would let him work in the capital without hindrance, that this ability allowed him to be in two places at once. And when Andre noted that instant teleportation does not exist, Kirito smiled and said that in his case it was possible. He tried to calm the other man, saying he had never heard anything like it before. The man said that for him it was not surprising at all. He offered to show his powers, which made Andre and Stella look surprised. Then he said he could take them to the royal capital. Nina immediately agreed, and Andre, smiling, said he had only had one glass of wine. They stood in the middle of a street in the royal capital, overwhelmed with astonishment and seized at once by fierce terror and shock. Astonished, he cried out in disbelief, unable to accept what was happening or how it could have happened. Stella looked up, saw the majestic towers of Zaral's castle, took a deep breath, slowly let it out, and realized the royal capital truly lay before her. Her eyes lit up, and she could hardly believe what she was seeing, saying it was incredible and a real royal capital. Nina kept smiling, noting with delight how huge the buildings were and how many people had gathered. Kurito wondered how unusually flexible her child was, like Shiki. Andres still could not believe any of it and thought it was a dream, so Stella suggested pinching him, and did. He gasped in sharp pain, clutching his cheek, and asked to go home. Dorito agreed, remembering how poor Nina's father must have been. Back home, the man immediately hugged every corner, saying, "Home, sweet home." Nino asked, surprised, why they had come back so soon since she had only just started enjoying the moment. Kurito apologized and promised he would give her even better conditions next time. She quickly caught his meaning and said she took his hint. Kurito then concluded that she was unusually quick-witted for her age. Andres realized he had grasped the nature of Kurito's magic and how it worked. His father explained to the young man that he planned to live in 2 places at once and added, it was a great idea, though very costly. Fuerito calmly said money was not a problem because he earned well. Andres, unable to contain his curiosity, asked what city slop meant, then sighed and said he would be glad to do it. Nina and Kurito looked at him in surprise. Anne warmly welcomed him to the village of Rig and said she hoped they could live in peace. He offered that they could always turn to him for help if any problems came up. Stella said that was a reason to celebrate, and Nina agreed happily. Thoughtful Andre said he should cook something tasty for dinner. His daughter smiled and promised to help, and the father, praising Nina, said he would like to have a drink with Kurito, though Stella had already noticed he had drunk too much. He agreed with a wide smile, saying he wanted their life to stay the same. Another day passed, filled with a warm family atmosphere. The house was wrapped in friendly harmony, and Kurito felt happy because there was room there for a small, though not his own, family. Earlier chapters explained that this magic lets people live in a cozy village or in a lavish capital, and after losing his last relative and falling into complete loneliness, Kurito is sent to another world by a mysterious being that gives him powerful spatial magic. Tasked by the capital guild, he travels to the picturesque village of Horan and meets Nina's family, and when local merchant Emilio learns of his unique ability, he offers a partnership that quickly makes their business thrive. So missing Horan and wanting to see Nina's family again, Kurito decides to use his magic to travel freely and settle there permanently while continuing his work in the capital. But after returning and reuniting with Nina's family, he realizes he must find a new home. Stepping into the yard, a cool breeze brushed his face, and barely awake, he yawned in a sleepy haze and quickly realized he had drunk too much last night. The sky mirrored Kurito's mood, and the weather outside stayed beautiful. The fresh air and beautiful views inspired him, and he understood why he had chosen this village to settle in. Life in that different world finally let him relax, and that choice turned out to be the best thing that had happened to him. Enjoying the fine weather, he decided it was time to think about a new place to live. Without time to think, Nina came up behind him and hugged him. Kurito bent slightly, feeling a mix of shock and mild pain. After wishing each other good morning, she asked what their plans were for the day, and the young man said he had not decided yet. So Nina suggested enjoying the cherry blossoms or walking along the stream. Kirito paused for a moment when her father came out of the house, looking as if a cart had run him over. Kirito greeted him gently, and Nina asked what had happened, and Andre explained that they had been standing too close together, and he had realized it was time to find a place of his own. He decided to ask a man how to find housing in this village. Andre, confused, repeated the question as if he had not understood the answer. The man explained that in the capital, you first get citizenship, then buy a home through a real estate agency. After that, the papers are filed with the city council, and they also check how the process works in rural areas. He was told that in the villages there is no bureaucracy. This made him curious about what takes its place here. He had to get permission from the village elder, and only then could he choose to move into an empty house or build a new one on a vacant plot of land. Piorito was very surprised and asked whether it was really that simple, and Andre explained that this is how things work in the villages. The process is not complicated, though the young man still doubted they would let him. Andre asked whether the man feared being rejected for such an unexpected request. The man sighed and said his words would speak for themselves. Andre reassured him not to worry, saying they were friends, and he could always count on his support. The man stressed he was not a beggar, since he had already sent money transfers here that proved his reliability. Andre was sure the elder would not refuse him. Toredo nodded in understanding. Smiling, she said she would stand up for him too. The young man thanked her sincerely, and Andre said they should have breakfast first because he could already smell the delicious food. His daughter and the young man immediately agreed. After a hearty breakfast, they set off for the headman's house. Though it looked like the others, it stood out for its unique architecture. The headman nodded softly to show he understood the situation. Leroy was the village leader. Someone approached him and confessed to having magical powers. Kirito apologized for scaring him. Since he had seemed to show his magic earlier, Nina, with a serious look, said she wanted to relocate. Her father replied it was too early to decide. Leroy nodded and said that after getting to know her, and with Andre's recommendation, there was no reason to refuse. The boy thanked with a smile, but the story did not end there. Kirito decided to ask one question, curious why this village had been chosen when there were better places for peace and his magic offered many options, and he turned to Andre and Nina to explain the problem, sounding a little upset. Before arriving here, he had no family and no place he could call home. Fully absorbed in his work, he remembered his father's constant advice to live the way he wanted. Others treated him with great kindness, even though he was a stranger, and they said they would always be glad to welcome him among them. Because of their warm, family-like atmosphere, he decided to settle there, rather than look for shelter elsewhere. And he explained that he wanted to live there because it was the life he had chosen, while the chief nodded in agreement. He said he was extremely pleased by the positive attitude toward their village, welcomed him as a new resident of Haran. Kirito sighed with relief, knowing everything had gone well. Venus smiled and said she was happy he had been accepted, and the boy added that the chief was a good man. Noticing this, he asked Nina why her father was walking slowly behind them. She quietly explained her father felt awkward because Kirito had confessed he liked them. They exchanged looks, and the boy said the father seemed modest. The father replied he was not modest at all, only that few people say such honest words to your face. Kirito realized such confessions are very rare, and the father asked him to forget about it. Norman let the boy stay in the village and gave Andre the keys to the empty houses, then suggested they tour the homes together and think about whether to build a new house or restore an existing one. The boy hesitated because his urgent wish to move pushed him toward building from scratch, even though he could have chosen a more expensive place and was also considering renovation. And now they stood in the center of the village, so Andre suggested they start the inspection there. They headed to the first house, modest in size. Andre noticed that despite its age, it was in excellent condition and ready to move in right away. Kurito nodded softly in agreement. After inspecting the house, he said it was not bad, but wished it were more spacious. They toured many homes, from wooden cabins to stone cottages, carefully assessing each based on neighborhood value, comfort level, and overall condition. Wanting to know if at least one option suited them, he asked, and Kurito said they were all fine. Logistics usually decided, but this time the situation was different. More and more possibilities opened up, and with his head in his hands, Kurito realized how many houses they had already passed without knowing where to stop. Andre said only the last house remained. The man raised an eyebrow in surprise, and they moved on. He apologized for the time lost, but Nina's father soothed him and promised to help. As they approached, they noticed an attractive medium-sized house, and Kurito, looking at it in surprise, felt a warm excitement. They could see the house below the hill. Andre noticed it was very close and felt awkward mentioning it. Kurito asked if anyone lived there. The man said the owners had moved out 3 months ago. Smiling, Kurito admitted he had been too shy to ask them to be neighbors, and Andre told him to keep quiet. He laughed and said it was a mistake not to offer that, since being neighbors is a real pleasure, and added that his looks far outshone the previous candidates. Andre tilted his head and with enthusiasm asked whether, damn it, he really spoke that beautifully. Then the man invited him into the house, and Andre replied that from now on, only doors would open. Sunlight filled every room inside the house. From the outside, it looked flawless and cozy, with a spacious living room, a bright hallway leading to the kitchen, and stairs up to the second floor. The living room felt very spacious, and Andre remembered that a large family had once lived here, which made him wonder if the house might be too big for him. But he smiled and decided it would be fine, because his job as a cleaner would let him enjoy the space. He also thought a small storage room could be set up here, and when Nina, already waiting on the stairs, called him to look at the second floor, he smiled and followed her. A few more rooms. He realized the house was too big for one person and had a plan. One room could become a storeroom and the other used for guests. And just as he was thinking over his next steps, Nina called him again from the first floor, and he could not hurry after her. Nina led him to the back exit, where a lovely view of nature immediately caught her eye. Smiling, she said, "A stream runs nearby, and if you listen, you can hear the waters murmur." They paused for a moment to hear the little brook ripple through woods and fields. Kurito noted that Nina knew the house well because she had once played there with the owner's children. He suggested that on fine days, a chair could be placed here to enjoy nature, and Andre stepped outside and said he liked it. He added that he sometimes goes into the yard, lights a small fire, melts cheese, grills sausages, and washes it down with a glass of ale. Kurito was impressed and said it sounded incredible. After thinking it over, he decided to stay. When Andre asked if he was sure, Kurito said the house suited him perfectly. Andre and Nina exchanged smiles to show their agreement. With a gentle smile, he promised to tell the leader. Kurito was overjoyed because he had finally found the perfect home. That day, the owner contacted the craftsman, who had arrived to finish outfitting the house. Andre asked if the owner would agree to a major renovation, but received a firm refusal. Still, he liked everything in the house and said that small changes to the kitchen and entryway would make them feel more like his own home. He dreamed only of moving here soon. Andre sighed deeply and said that once things were settled, they could go fishing together. The boy asked about fishing and said excitedly that it would be wonderful. Despite his skills, the boy could only reach a mountain stream, and Kurito reminded him they should stick to familiar routes. Enjoying village life and the surrounding beauty, he suddenly remembered he had to go to the capital today to report on the situation, and Andre nodded with a touch of sadness in his voice. Remembering he'd been here a few days, he worried about being fired. The job was flexible, so there was no need to stress. The village felt too relaxed, and he hadn't expected the work schedule to be so demanding. He decided that if he went there, he could look for new furniture. Vidov said goodbye and suggested they go fishing when they returned, casually watching the boy rise into the air and marveling again and again at his unmatched magic, when Nina's voice called Kurito from behind, and her father told her he had returned to the capital, prompting her to sigh as boredom crept back in. Appeared in the capital in an instant. After stretching, he realized how long it had been since he had walked the capital's streets. The city surprised him with how lively it felt. Heredo decided to check on Emilio first to make sure he was all right, since the furniture could wait. As he walked, he smiled, remembering the taste of a great lunch at a local cafe. Someone suddenly appeared before Kurito and startled him with a greeting. The newcomer asked what was going on and warned him not to be scared like that again. Emilio said Kurito would be back soon and suggested they wait here. The young man admitted he had been really scared and wondered if he could predict other people's moves. Kurito wanted to know if there were urgent matters, but Rodney said he knew nothing, so he went to Emilio and asked if Rodney would accompany him. Using magic, he slipped into Emilio's entourage and with Rodney appeared in Emilio's office to greet him, while Rodney, looking serious, asked who had returned, and Kurito said he had warned him about the absence, which Emilio confirmed. He explained that he had stayed much longer than he originally planned. Kurito apologized sincerely, admitting he had gotten a bit carried away. There were no urgent matters, just excitement about being away so long. Emilio then asked if he had found a place to enjoy life and asked for the details. Talking about his new home and his plan to live in two places, Emilio was a bit surprised and said there was definitely something interesting about the idea. And Kurito added he had always dreamed of a roomy house outside town because the village of Horn is a lovely place with many friendly people. He said the decision was right. Emilio smiled and said it made him look even better, adding that living between the two bases gives him real pleasure. If this is truly his deliberate choice, he will respect it. Torito said he would not sacrifice himself for the company, but he also cannot afford to lose his job. Emilio confirmed that this was enough. He said the company was growing fast, so there would always be tasks only he could handle. Chirido nodded in understanding. Looking up, he added that since he would have to live at two bases, he would need housing in the capital. The young man replied thoughtfully that his current living conditions were sufficient. Leo said angrily that he deserved his own home, explaining that living in a hotel meant he could never be sure when he would return, and he did not want Rodney to have to wait for him in the street every time, because if Rodney waited inside the hotel, managers would be displeased, and he would not agree to damage their good relations. If Kurito had his own house in the capital, he could wait for his boat as long as he wanted. The boy thought for a moment, pointed at Kurito, and agreed with the idea. Firmly, he said that if Kurito planned to live on two bases, Kurito should allow himself another house. At that moment, the boy understood Emilio's words, smiled, and confirmed them. Emilio also suggested hiring a servant to deliver packages, which surprised Kurito. Kurito shrugged it off, thinking hiring a servant was an unnecessary indulgence since he had already earned enough, and the Polterians were not used to such luxury, and he doubted he should interfere because he did not belong to the bourgeoisie. But Emilio decided to ask whether he could keep both houses adequately clean. Even a single house was already a challenge for him because the home was clearly large. If he did not use it regularly, it could collect dust and dirt within a week, especially given the other circumstances. Maintaining two houses at once was extremely hard for him, and Kurorito had good reason to agree to it. Emilio smiled and asked if he truly agreed. He also said that if he planned to have his own home here, he should have household help. Emilio thought it over and agreed. Sure, there was nothing wrong with the idea. Besides, with his connections, he could buy property at a better price. He reassured him that he would personally take care of the servants. Kuruto realized they had not even tried to hide that detail. His thoughts returned to the house in the royal capital, and he moved on down the street. He thought Emilio had probably gotten too carried away and felt a rising unease while remembering the furniture for the house in Goran still hadn't been bought. But Emilio was right about one thing. His contacts were clearly useful, and despite everything, he decided to continue inspecting the house. Lost in thought, he didn't notice the girl and accidentally brushed her shoulder. Apologizing quickly, he asked if she was all right. The girl apologized in return. Fiorito couldn't help noticing her beauty and elegance, which would suit an aristocrat. Kurito's life in his new residence on the royal capital grounds was going to be nothing like he had imagined. Arriving to inspect Kurito's new home, he was stunned and could not believe his eyes. A vast estate unfolded before him with expansive grounds and striking fountains forming fairy tale shapes. I asked Emilio why he needed such a huge estate, and he said the more space the better, while Kurito pointed out it was not actually that big. He said the estate was too large because his main home was in the village, and Emilio replied firmly that he should stop complaining since the servants could handle such a house easily. Emilio added he planned to use a discount because he dreamed of living in a fine home. But just as the man was about to answer, a girl who had come with Emilio interrupted and explained they were preparing a better real estate package for Mr. Emilio's friend, with a very varied selection of houses so everyone could find something they liked, and all that was left was to say which house you wanted, and she would pick the perfect option, and Kurita would not be surprised if he learned she worked for Emilia. Gathering everyone, he said, "Enough talk, time is money. Now let's go see the house." Kurita reacted in surprise that he sounded like he was buying a home for himself. He replied, also surprised, that he enjoyed looking for a home for his friends. It seemed to me that everything sounded a bit odd. The man explained the spot offered an incredible view and a large company was nearby. He asked why that house had not been chosen, and the other man, as if made to look foolish, answered with a complaint. Then he asked why the house did not appeal to him, and was told that being so close to the company would make it hard to relax. Emilio sighed, saying it was a pity, but Kurito realized it would be wise to keep an eye on that guy. Inspect the estate that impressed with its luxury. Walking the narrow streets, Kurito noticed an unusual silence for a royal capital. The woman explained that an aristocrat had once lived there, but the house had been empty for 3 years. Though far from the center, the place's calm was captivating. At last, they reached their destination, and she invited them to look around the house. This house was no less grand than the previous mansion. The house surprised her with its coziness, but Emilio pointed out it did not look like a wealthy estate because of its simple classical style. She explained the aristocrat who once lived there favored a modest life without excess. Emilio noticed his tastes matched that aristocrats, and life in such quiet is much calmer. Later, she suggested they go inside, and everyone agreed. He stood, unable to believe his eyes. The house was the size of an estate, but felt incredibly calm. The woman confirmed this, saying the difference in size and room count was barely noticeable. She added that all their homes had magical fire and water artifacts, and the young man said he liked how convenient that was. Yet this house had one more unique feature. She said the room had a private bathroom, but the boy doubted it. As he went on, he stepped into a roomy bathroom that surprised him. Emilio said he was fastidious about cleanliness and showered every day, and Kurito then asked why that would be a problem. Emilio explained that people in this world did not bathe so often. He had heard girls bathe only once every 3 days, and he had to use public baths to enjoy hot water. The boy stood silent and amazed, unable to find words. He announced firmly that he had definitely decided to take the house and asked its price. This made a strong impression on Emilio, who was surprised to find he liked the house. The woman said she usually set the price at 500 gold coins, but because he was Emilio's friend, she offered a discount and would sell it for 400 gold. Kurito realized that was too low for the local real estate market. Then Emilio joined the conversation and asked for an extra discount. Emilio was very surprised when she set the price at 380, but that amount did not satisfy him. Convinced it would please her management, he said he would give discounts only on the items she chose. She gradually lowered the price to the minimum, even though he insisted it would be more profitable for him to sell without discounts. Finally, she fixed the price at 150 gold, which made Kurito feel uneasy during the discussion. Emilio immediately smiled and said they were completely satisfied and ready to buy the house. She thanked them with a slight nervousness in her voice. Kurito began to feel uneasy after winning a large discount. He told Emilio he had cut the price on purpose to push him to work harder. The man added that he had deliberately lowered the amount to make him try harder. He was proven right, because the goods were extremely valuable, and he would have to handle their delivery personally. He didn't think the discount was wasted, but he immediately said he was only joking because the goods were already in the warehouse. It pleased him that Kurito had managed to buy a house at a good price. Emilio kept intimidating him, but by doing so, secured a second house in the royal capital's upscale district. 3 days later, Kurito returned to the house and found everything already finished. He asked Emilio if the work had been rushed, and Emilio said the house was in good shape, so a quick cleaning made sense. Later, Kurito asked about the furniture, and Emilio explained he had asked the makers to speed up production a little. Kurito then asked whether that went too far, but Emilio replied confidently that everything was fine and the results would pay off. He remembered arranging for the servants. Kurito also remembered hearing about it. When they entered the house, a boy met them and asked if everyone had arrived. Then a voice said warmly, "Welcome." Doe noticed an attractive young woman with long golden hair. She turned to him and gently said that everyone was looking forward to their arrival. 3 other girls stood behind her, smiling kindly as they watched them. Surprise and a small embarrassment swept over her when Emilio explained that these girls were his servants. They did not match her expectations at all. After receiving spatial magic from a mysterious being that lets him travel anywhere, Fuda Kurito decided to base himself in 2 places at once, one in the capital and one in the countryside. He finally fulfilled his dream by buying a new house in the capital, but the servants Emilio arranged did not meet his expectations. These girls turned out to be servants, and the one in charge said she had fallen into hardship because Mr. Kurito mismanaged the estate. Leaning forward slightly in a polite gesture, she introduced herself as Elsa Walker, the head maid, and smiled, saying the meeting had been a real pleasure. Understanding this, he surprised Emilio by not mentioning that she planned to hire young women. And Emilio just smiled, saying there was nothing wrong, since for men it was a feast for the eyes. But when he heard her surname, he was taken aback and addressed her again as an aristocrat. She insisted she was one of the so-called chodaks. Being the fourth daughter of a modest parish family put him at ease, but the young man asked whether that applied to the other servants, and the girl, somewhat surprised, replied, "No, they come from an infertile family." During the introductions, the girl with red braids said she was Larasha Elfur. The blonde with two ponytails used the names Lulu and Mistolt, and the brunette said she was Arslandora, and they all said they were pleased to meet him. Everyone said they had applied for internships at Emilio's company to gain the necessary experience. And Emilio added that daughters of noble families sometimes work as assistants and receive a grant. And shocked Kuruto immediately demanded to know why, damn it, he had put the girls in his estate to work as servants. He paused briefly, said he did not understand what they were talking about, and Kuruto snapped that he should not try to play dumb. In this world, except for some races, anyone with a family name was seen as a noble, but not all nobles belonged to the upper class, and younger children often took jobs in service, though that was not the main issue. The surname sounded familiar, since all the girls' families were tied together by business. Behind the polite talk was an unsettling reality. The girls were only 12 to 15 years old, and even the oldest servant seemed under 20. These details strongly suggested a criminal scheme. He blushed and hid his face in his hands, finding it hard to relax, where even the servants ranked higher, and feeling it was wrong to treat those girls that way. Emilio said, with a slight smile, that Kurito was lucky to be among real beauties. And Kurito said there was nothing good about it, and wondered why only girls were chosen, while Emilio replied in surprise that Kurito might want boys too. He explained that when he came home exhausted, he preferred to see lovely girls rather than stern men, because it calmed him. Kurito asked if he had tried that, and Emilio said he already had a cozy countryside cottage to unwind in, since he could not find anything like it in the royal capital. And those words made him think. He looked at him with suspicion. Then the boy smiled and asked if he had guessed, and Emilio explained that at their first meeting he had clearly said he was not interested in men, but could not understand why the other man disliked his company, and Toretto said he had misunderstood him. A little Nina with a bright smile appeared before his eyes, and he suddenly realized that merely thinking of her could lead to his death. Kurito said he wanted a peaceful life and had no intention of getting involved in intrigues, and Emilio sighed, saying his thinking sounded like an old man's. Kurito settled in the living room when Elsa asked if they wanted tea, and everyone agreed happily, with one of them even choosing tea without sugar. Kurito watched Elsa closely, looking at her intently. It seemed awkward, he said, and the young man replied he could not relax while the maids bustled about the house. Emilio added that he did not like giving orders at work, and the young man said he never did that because he respected the deeply ingrained habits of a typical employee. Soon, the girl brought tea and set it on the table, and Kurito thanked her warmly. She told him that although they had shown respect, they were now his servants and of lower status, so extra politeness was unnecessary. Emilio confirmed that this was the only way to make clear who was master and who was servant. Heredo admitted it would be hard to get used to the new order at first, but promised to adapt over time. The boy agreed and thanked her again for the advice. She gave him a stern look, as if scolding him for doing something wrong. Kurito said he understood her, though deep down he thought she was incredibly beautiful, but also made him uneasy. After Emilio left Neo, he soon felt uneasy in the house and decided to go, since their contract had been signed too quickly and he wondered why everyone was in such a hurry on his day off. But Elsa surprised him by not batting an eye when she learned about his magic. As he left, he joked with the maids that if the contract were cancelled, Mr. Kurito would start pursuing them, which added a light sense of fear. Yet Oz took his words too seriously, and that caused a bit of tension. She paid no mind to small things. Her manners showed she was of aristocratic birth. At that moment, someone called Kurito, and when he turned, he couldn't believe who he saw. Reed, one of the adventurers from the Thunder Sword group, stopped by a nearby cafe. Kurito, smiling, noted that they had not seen each other for a long time and asked how Reed was, and Reed replied confidently that everything was fine. Then, Reed raised his brows seriously and said that after giving up regular visits, he had to shed some lazy habits. Kurito laughed, said he recognized his old friend, and asked about the rest of the team. Harad noted that today was their day off. Anna and Alina went to the public baths, and Rox chose to spend the evening with a drink and a few old guild friends. Harad remembered he could always use his own bath and realized buying it had been worth it. Rid asked how he was doing, since he had heard about his work for the company. That made Harad pause before answering, and then he told everything in detail. Reed was surprised to hear Kurito had bought an estate with servants. Kurito's work and earnings caught his interest, so he asked for more details. Kurito refused to share the specifics, saying it was private. Vij just joked that owning a house is really nice. Kurito then explained the purchase had been carefully planned, but he never expected housemaids to turn up, who, it turned out, were daughters of noble families. Now, he finds it hard to imagine how he will face their fathers. Vij said he had heard something like that before, and admitted he was a little jealous of Kurito. The younger man apologized, saying it was not boasting, but an expression of his real worries. His friend understood the situation and supported him, saying he fully understood his feelings. He said they were very young and inexperienced, probably on their first try and feeling awkward, and that everyone has to start somewhere. As a young adventurer himself, he admitted to a string of failures and often bad luck. Still, with reliable guild leadership, any adventurer could find comfort in the support offered. He understood that taking on subordinates so suddenly was not easy, but had to be decisive for their sake. Kurito fully agreed with him. They looked calm, but it was their first job, and Kurito, more than anyone, knew how it felt to work for a lazy boss. So he paused briefly. Realizing he had to act now, he made a firm decision. Meanwhile, Elsa, on her usual evening rounds, planned to knock on her master's door. Unexpectedly, while she stood there, Kurito appeared behind her and said he was home. Hearing his voice, she jumped in fright and stared at him. Kurito immediately apologized for scaring her. She bowed her head shyly, apologized for being startled, and admitted she had caused the fear herself. Fiorito knew her cold, reserved manner could seem distant, but she was still young and inexperienced. Turning back to her, he said he wanted a bath, even though it was early, and asked her to prepare it for him. She smiled gently and said she would prepare everything immediately. Shurido returned her warm smile, convinced there was nothing wrong, and resolved to be truly hospitable. Soon, he spoke to her again. She spoke frankly about him going out to dinner. Kirito said it happened because of too much drinking. Elsa pointed out there were no cooks in their group, and Kirito admitted he had not thought of that. He suggested ordering delivery from a restaurant, but Elsa said that if the gentlemen wanted dinner, they could make it themselves, although they could not match experienced chefs. That surprised him, but he assured her the arrangement suited him. Soon, Elsa set the table, and Kurito, admiring the dishes, said we had unexpectedly been served authentic folk food, which Elsa confirmed. He explained that although they were aristocrats, their roots were in small border towns where family life was little different from that of commoners. And Kuruto nodded in understanding. Girls who entered service lost their inheritance rights, many married into other families, and only a fourth or fifth daughter could expect to marry a knight or a lower-rank merchant, while becoming a mistress was often treated as a kind of trial before an official marriage. And at that point, Kuruto seemed to grasp the situation. Maybe they had been sent here to marry Emilio, since his sudden disappearance only made that seem more likely. Kuruto chose not to think about it. To his surprise, the dinner was excellent, and that night, Kuruto slept a deep, undisturbed sleep. Waking up in luxury in the grand capital, he realized things were not so bad. The hot bath brought him real pleasure now that it was available every day, and he could relax as long as he wanted. It was a fine way to fight fatigue. He remembered Elsa kindly offering to help wash and massage his back. After changing, he realized it was time to get to work. Kurito met him on the first floor and explained the day's plans. He said he needed to check the house and village repairs, which should already be finished since he would return to the capital in 3 days. He added that Emilio already knew, but asked to warn him again. Over time, Kurito grew closer to Elsa and the others. He asked Elsa to look after the estate while he was away, and she bowed her head and said confidently that he could rely on her. He wished her a wonderful day, thanked her, then vanished into the air, leaving a light breeze behind. He showed up unexpectedly in the village of Goran. Looking at the house's exterior, he realized everything was ready. Though facade work was not part of the contract, the building looked beautiful, and a small, cozy garden had been added in the backyard. The changes were small, but obvious enough to refresh the house's look. Fiorito tried to go inside, but the door was locked, and he realized he couldn't get in without a key. That did not surprise him, since the door was new and the lock had just been fitted. Not knowing where the carpenter lived, Fiorito had no choice but to ask the village head. Then someone called to him. Nina nodded to him, indicating he had returned. Loudly, she said she had his house key, and he brightened, saying it was great news. Then she offered to bring it right away, but Fiorito told her not to hurry. Despite that, Nina ran over and handed him the key, and he thanked her warmly. A satisfied expression crossed his face. Kirito, intrigued by her gaze, asked why she was staring at him so intently. She said she did not mind looking him over too. The man gladly agreed and announced she would be his first guest. Nina, truly pleased, smiled softly in return. Frito remembered how energetic she was, but even so, children always stayed sweet. Not looking for romance now, he thought he might want a family someday, but had no one specific in mind, and Nina was already urging him to open the door. He asked her to wait a moment. Then they opened the door together and peered carefully at what lay behind it. Inside the house, bright light flooded the hallway, cutting through every corner and filling the room with a gentle glow. Nina immediately noticed the change and the extra space that had appeared. As soon as she set foot on the floor, Kurito stopped her. He looked at her and asked what had happened, then asked her to wear slippers when entering his home. Curious, she asked why, and he answered that shoes were strictly forbidden inside. Holding the slippers, she asked in surprise if this was a capital city custom, but Kurito said it was only his whim. Nina glanced at him with distrust and said he was a little odd. Inside, Kurito thought her naive frankness could wound him like a knife without a blade. He firmly stuck to his principles. In the capital, everything was perfectly ordered. They cleaned at every turn and paved the streets with stone, so his shoes stayed clean. In the village of Horan, the mood was different. Wild paths, where mud and grass took turns, created their own rhythm of life. So he left a special spot to take off his shoes, which seemed odd to the locals, and the girls said right away that it was wonderful. Lena noted how light the shoes felt, and Kurito agreed, explaining they were very comfortable and seemed to float above the floor, which made her admire his cleverness. Lena said she liked the shoes and would wear them at home. Kurito smiled and suggested making them a new country fashion, and they laughed together. As they moved further into the living room, they installed panoramic windows that offered a sweeping view of the mountains, and Nina said the space felt larger, while Kurito replied that everything remained the same. He removed the wall that once framed the fireplace and opened the space to the kitchen. Nina said that was the idea, yet she still felt the room seemed larger. He explained he could not stand the cramped kitchen and wanted room to move more freely. Curious, Nina asked if he could cook, and he nodded, saying that living alone had taught him to cook as he liked. Surprised, she smiled and said she never imagined men could be so skilled in the kitchen, and he smiled gently and agreed. She explained that this happened because she had never seen her dad cook, and he only ever made a cup. Oh read it, laughed, and said he could not imagine Andre cooking. Meanwhile, Andre, busy with his duties, suddenly sneezed, which made her think he might have a cold. She noted that not only the father, but other village men helped prepare food. Teorito believed that in his world, men almost never cook, focusing only on work or household duties, though of course there would be cooks. That was why she was so surprised by the situation. He explained he was currently far from Stella and suggested that if a chance arose, we could cook together. In response, Nina asked about the process with interest, and he smiled and confirmed it. He explained they would cook together and share meals because there was always room for everyone. Even when Kurito was away from the village, he and his mother could still use the kitchen. The boy thought it was worth doing everything to bring people closer and keep the family feeling perfect, because a home like that had no place for emptiness. Nina suddenly interrupted his thoughts. A new, greater joy seemed about to fill their life. She looked forward to the moment when they could cook tasty meals together, head into the forest to catch insects, play by the river, and admire the flowers. With Kurito, she had many shared plans and exciting ideas. Smiling, she showed how happy she was that he had moved in here, stressed that each day would be full of fun, reached out her hand and said she was glad to meet her new neighbor. Offering his hand, he smiled warmly and said he was pleased to meet her. The ringing suddenly reminded Nina that she had to rush home. Fiorito, raising his eyebrows in surprise, impatiently asked about her chores at home. She said she helps on a farm, tending leeks and other plants. Kirito thought that was really cool. She asked to look around his home more, but he pointed out they are neighbors now and she can come by any time. That made her very happy. Lena promised to give him an onion when it ripens, said goodbye, and slipped through the door. The boy was struck by how quickly childhood passes, like a light breeze. Remembering her words about the farm, the boy realized that living here, he could grow vegetables that would help him. So he decided to discuss the idea with Stella, and when he entered the room, he looked around in surprise as the space came alive before his eyes. The room was spacious but empty. He had many tasks to do, so he decided to start by filling the open space and airing the room. Opening the window, a cool, refreshing breeze came into the house. He admired the view stretching out before his house through the open window and explained that this was what a life built on two foundations looked like. With his strength gathered, he realized it was time to start setting things up. He came by, saying he had just finished his workday and decided to help with the move, and Kurito sincerely thanked him for the help. Saying he had finished work only a few minutes earlier surprised Andre at how fast he had been. He explained that his magic made it easy to carry luggage and set things up instantly, and Andre nodded, but when he sadly asked for help, he got an apology from the boy, who, surprised, invited them for tea, and Andre suddenly thought of a housewarming, but Stella stopped him, saying Kurito still had many tasks, and Kurito smiled and said that if he had already finished, then there was no reason not to. After thinking, he decided to ask Stella to cook something tasty. Kurito said that if it was no trouble, they could use his kitchen, since he was too exhausted to cook. The friend agreed on the condition they would only look through his house briefly. Kurito walked home with Stella and Nina. Noting how forcefully Andre acted, he envied that energy and realized he could not cook anything himself. He then decided to try making a range of drinks. He walked ahead and called out happily that his visitors were nearly there. Stella smiled and greeted him, saying it was no trouble to visit on his first day of moving. The young man waved it off and said everything was fine and the house was ready. But when they reached the threshold, Nina immediately stopped Andre and Stella and explained that shoes are not allowed in the Kurito house. The young man only smiled gently, while Nina's parents watched in surprise. Nina suggested taking off their shoes and putting on slippers, and Dorito agreed with his daughter's idea. In the end, they all noticed how comfortable and light the slippers were and wanted to buy a pair for themselves. The young man thought about how quickly these amazing slippers might become popular. They stepped into the living room and were immediately struck by how skillfully it was arranged. He was pleasantly surprised to learn the house was truly impressive, but Kurito immediately noticed she had been here before. Henri observed the young man had a great sense of style, which surprised Kurito even more. Kurito recalled that in his past life, he never decorated his home with plants. Looking at his wife, Kurito wondered whether she was all right or perhaps ill. Turning to Sean brightly, she examined the new kitchen closely, impressed by the modern space filled with magical appliances popular in the capital, admitting she had never seen such perfect equipment and hardly believing that even the water could flow magically, while Shirido watched her reactions, fully absorbed in wonder. Stella had never looked so excited. Nina suggested buying her mother the same kitchen, and Andre guessed it must be very expensive. So Stella apologized with a soft smile, and Kurito said it was all right, and told her to use the kitchen since she could not manage everything alone, his words making a strong impression on everyone. And later, Andre suggested Nina look around Kurito's house, but Stella reminded them they were only guests and asked her to avoid any odd behavior. She apologized to the boy for the noise. Kurito smiled and said they had had a great time, then invited her to his house and suggested she do the cooking. She replied that she had already prepared some dishes at home and opened a basket of treats. Kurito said everything looked very appetizing, and she explained one of the dishes was a small pot of creamy potato chowder. Roast venison was served, and she hoped the delicacy would please him. Kurito, amazed by the variety of dishes, said it tasted great, though he felt indifferent inside. Summer had come to this world too. Kurito enjoyed the seasonal dish. The boy asked what she planned to do with the leftovers. She said she would make a roast with a gylog mushroom sauce and a fresh salad. Hearing this, he gladly offered to help if that was all that was needed. Stella suggested they start cooking before hunger took over, and Kurito agreed. Quickly, he undressed and went to cook dinner. Stella said Nina had told her that he really could cook. Smiling, Kurito added that living on his own had improved his cooking a little. He said it was great that he could cook on his own, for Kurito felt a little uneasy about his lack of confidence. Nina's mother said her husband would only help in extreme cases. Smiling, he replied that if she turned to him, he probably would not refuse to help. She asked him to confirm if he really believed that, and Furito confirmed, convinced his love for the family matched hers. Casting a stern look over his shoulder, he turned and saw Andre watching them closely. Furito asked him not to scare them like that. Andre replied he would replace him in the kitchen, and taken aback, Furito instantly rushed to the door. Someone asked what was wrong with him, and Nina said she did not understand his reaction. But a moment later she added that maybe he was upset because she had admitted that Kurito gets along well with her mother, and when jealousy hit him, the boy immediately admitted he felt an unnatural warmth. At the same time, shouts came from the kitchen that someone was overheating, and her mother's voice loudly asked whether everything was all right. Andre stood by the stove talking when she gently wiped his burned hand with a damp towel, his injury clearly visible, and nearby Furito and Nino watched with interest, one of the boys calling the scene beautiful and Nino responding approvingly. With a smile, she explained that when she married, she would try to have the same harmonious happiness her parents had. Kurito was surprised that someone her age was already thinking about such things, but their conversation was interrupted when her parents called Nina to help set the table. Nina hurried to the table and asked if the young man would help, and he nodded and took a seat. Then the father smiled and said it was time to celebrate Kurito's housewarming. They raised their glasses and said together, "Cheers." Smiling, she said she would like to try the first dish her father had made. Kurito quickly agreed and added that he was curious to taste the experiment. Andre wished everyone a good meal. When they each took a small taste, their faces went pale. Kurito said the meat was burnt on the outside and undercooked inside, and Nina pointed out the vegetables were too hard. The father could not believe them and insisted the dishes could not have turned out that way. Only Stella kept quiet and smiled gently. For his family's well-being, Andre was ready to do anything. Kurito offered to train together so they could succeed next time. A sharp sound woke him at dawn, breaking his calm. At first, he could not tell where it came from. The morning bell announced the start of a new day. Now, living in the village, Kurito set the kettle over the fire to boil water for tea. Opening the veranda window, he stepped out and, leaning calmly on the railing, enjoyed the beautiful view, thinking how tiring a life of too much luxury could be, and grateful for the peace now around him since no one paid attention to how he drank his tea. There he lived in complete freedom, in a kind of stronghold that belonged only to him. He could have breakfast anywhere, drink tea in different corners, and be a little lazy. That was the charm of his double life, and there he could finally relax. Stepping into the yard, he immediately started doing exercises. Suddenly, Nina ran up to him, cheerfully saying, "Good morning." Kurito returned the greeting and added that she had gotten up very early today. Then he asked what she was doing and explained that he was exercising to relax more easily. Nina looked at him in surprise. Not knowing why it was needed, she decided to try it with him. Kurito agreed and asked her to repeat after him, which she accepted. They began doing a variety of warm-up exercises together. Smiling, Fiorito noted that the movements looked rather odd. He guessed that to someone from another world, they would probably seem that way. The boy explained not to underestimate the value of such exercises because they really help relax the body, which impressed her. Then he realized the warm-up had gone on too long. Fiorito smiled and said it was over, and Nina, surprised, admitted she had enjoyed it. Just then, they heard a friendly "good morning" from Stella. He came over and wished her good morning. After she apologized that Nina had been bothering him since early morning, He calmly said it was fine, and that being with her made things a lot more fun. Fiorito noted that after moving here, Nina had become much happier, and the daughter smiled, moved, confirming it. It struck him as a pleasant sight, and after that, she asked not to be kept long because work in the fields still awaited her, while Nina replied she would certainly remember the request. After parting with Kurito, she stayed with her mother. It was only later that he realized he was alone and began to think about who was really entertaining whom in that situation. Remembering to enjoy his free time, he realized he was definitely not alone, found a stool, set it by the tree, and sat down comfortably. It would be wonderful to cool off in the shade. For a moment he thought about grilling sausages over the fire, as Andre suggested, but alcohol after breakfast was definitely not for him. Looking up at the sky, he immediately came up with a great idea. Heading into a small wood, he carefully hung a hammock between two tall trees and immediately knew it was exactly what he needed. He remembered that in his free time, he had once borrowed some fabric and rope from Emilio and used them to skillfully make his own hammock. And although Emilio doubted the idea and Toretto felt a little uneasy about the handmade work, the hammock felt pleasantly soft, so he decided to try resting in it. And as he lay down, he unexpectedly felt a light shock. A true genius, Kurito remembered that in his past life, he had never dreamed of such a luxurious, peaceful existence, as gentle sunbeams filtered through the trees and a cool, light breeze brushed the boy's face. He looked up at the sky and watched birds circle overhead. The soft rustle of the trees pleased him, creating the perfect home he had long dreamed of. Gradually, his eyes began to close. Dozing in the hammock, he enjoyed every sound and moment unfolding around him. Nina suddenly flew up to him and asked what was going on. He jumped up in surprise and asked why she was there, since she was supposed to be working in the fields. Nina explained that although she had been working, she was very curious about what Mr. Kirito was doing. He apologized for distracting her from her work. Stella approached them and apologized for not being able to stop her from interfering. Kirito only smiled gently, remembering how children enjoy such things and realizing how curious and eager she was to try something new. So he understood why she could not hold back. Nina said she would like to try lying in the hammock, and Kirito agreed, promising to support her so she could get comfortable. Then Stella apologized again and asked everyone to wait until she calmed down so they could all return to work. She beamed with excitement and joy as she described how much fun she had. Kirito promised to rock her and immediately began, making her laughter grow louder. Stella asked whether she felt true happiness, explaining it was time to get back to work. But her daughter insisted she had to try to feel it for herself. Nino insisted that Stella try lying in the swing. Stella agreed, saying that if they insisted so much, it was worth a try. Carefully settling into the swing, she closed her eyes as she had been told. Nina stood there for a few minutes, aware she had drifted off. Then the boy asked loudly, surprised, whether she had really dozed off, and she immediately opened her eyes, startled. Getting out of the hammock, she said anxiously there was no time to rest because she urgently had to go to work. Fiorito thought she really looked tired. Nina suggested spending the day playing, but the young man pulled back, saying a hammock is just a hammock, and a play day made no sense. Looking at her mother, Nina said she, too, dreamed of her own hammock, but the man said he had had enough, stressing that plants live like people, and Nina agreed. After thanking Kurito and saying goodbye, Nina asked to stay on the swing a little longer, and he smiled, waved his consent, and echoed Stella's words that plants have souls. In his old world, such matters rarely concerned him because everything was much more complicated. Self-sufficient rural life. They chose countryside covered in lush greenery. He was sure it was the right choice, but he lacked the necessary knowledge. Resting in a hammock, Kurito thought about his own farm. He pictured a variety of plants coming to life in his yard. Seeing how appealing the idea was, he decided to try gardening. Realizing every task deserves full commitment, he decided he could set aside all effort for today and, enjoying the rest, told himself to spend the day relaxing. He closed his eyes and fell into a sweet sleep with a warm smile. Kurito was doing chores when Andre and Nina knocked at the door. Nina's father asked about the hammock. Kurito, a little nervous, smiled and led him to it. Seeing the hammock's growing popularity, Kurito decided to explain how to make one. Thanks to space magic, Kurito travels between the capital and the village, and after listening to Nina, he decided he wanted a farm in the village of Horan to grow crops, so he asked Andre for advice, inspected the family plot, and when Andre asked what had prompted the move, Kurito said he wanted to plant something, and Andre smiled in support and said it was a great idea. Andre smiled and offered to help, which surprised the other man, who asked if Andre was sure and got a yes. And the man said it was great that Andre was interested in farming. Andre then asked if the other had any prior experience, and Kurito admitted he had once grown a few small plants. Andre said that was a good start, and realizing it was best to begin with something simple, Kurito asked if there were crops a beginner could grow, which made Andre pause to think. He wanted something that would not need daily care, and Kurito agreed right away, saying it would be perfect if it could grow by itself with the right care. Andre thought for a moment and suggested growing green onions or potatoes. Soon Stella came over to greet them, and Kurito answered with a cheerful smile. Andre said she had arrived at exactly the right time because Kurito wanted something so simple he could manage himself. After a brief pause, Stella suggested they go and look at the nearby field, and Kurito accepted with a smile. A small, beautifully kept plot of land left Kurito stunned. She praised its beauty, and Andre agreed. She asked him if he felt confident he could handle it, and he said yes. Stella explained that you can grow green onions in a flower pot at home, and that potatoes will grow on their own, adding that even busy Kurito could manage the task. Kurito brightened and said he was ready for the challenge. Andre offered him a taste of the freshly picked onion, and Kurito smiled and agreed. Seeing Andre's hand next to his, Kurito was struck by how large it looked. Stella explained that this size was normal for that onion. The bulb was truly colossal, nothing like he had imagined. It matched the size of a special onion grown in his homeland, and he realized he could never grow one that big. Turning to Stella, he showed her that the size might be smaller in other places. Stella said it was far too small and suggested he was imagining the size since it was really just a weed. He felt as if he had lost his mind. For a moment, Andre broke it, cleaned it carefully, and offered Kurito a taste. Stella wished him a good appetite, and he gladly took the first bite. Beaming with happiness, he said how sweet it was. Despite its huge size, it tasted like a ripe fruit. Andre noted it could be eaten in any form, baked or boiled, though he preferred it raw. Stella explained that this ingredient is essential for cooking, very easy to grow, and requiring no effort to prepare, a remark aimed at their mentor Garnish. Kurito thought he liked it like coal. He said he planned to grow green onions, and Andre was surprised by how quickly he agreed, while Stella suggested they focus on garlic since it was already there. And surprised, he said it looked like a potato and guessed it must be different from what he knew back home. So Stella explained that garlic does resemble a potato, but is much easier to eat because it has a rich flavor and a hearty texture. She urged him to pay close attention since it was grown in the neighboring field, and Kurito immediately said he definitely wanted to see it. At another small field, where little green bushes grew, Kurito was excited at the thought of seeing the heart of the fields, and Stella said she would bring a few right away to try. They explained that these vegetables are simple to grow, they thrive with minimal care, and need little effort. Sarito reacted with interest and found that appealing. Henri added, "They are even easier to grow than onions," and Sarito nodded. Then Stella joined the conversation and showed a couple of potato varieties. He noticed the potatoes looked longer and thinner than usual. Farito was surprised, but explained they needed to be boiled and offered to take some home to cook. Smiling, she thanked him sincerely. She added that growing other crops had been somewhat harder and asked his opinion. He said he would try growing green onions and potatoes, and Andre agreed and assured him he would. Smiling, she promised to share seeds and seedlings without any problem, and the boy, surprised, asked if she was sure, while Andre said he had plenty, so there was nothing to worry about, and added that anyone could always turn to her for help in case of difficulties, for which he received thanks. They helped him again. That same day, Kurito immediately got to work, preparing a 3 by 4 meter planting area in the backyard, marking the plot boundaries. He carefully checked that the dimensions matched Andre's recommendations and was ready to start. Knowing it would be hard to handle the whole area at once, he decided to expand the field gradually as he got used to it. First, he had to remove the weeds. Seeing how many there were, he considered the next steps. The shrinking spell reduced the grass to almost nothing, leaving the ground nearly bare. A simple move, but the being who gave him these powers never imagined he would use magic to trim the grass. It saved time, because the roots stayed in the soil and could be removed when he began digging, right after finishing the trim. On using distortion magic to dig the soil. He was about to cast a spell, but paused, decided to quit loafing and got to work. And Andre, nodding toward him, said he had brought fertilizer and suggested adding it when they started digging. It was surprising to see he had already started digging. They asked whether he had been working too fast. He said he was too lazy to tidy everything by hand, so he used his magic. Andre said that was very convenient and asked him to show how he did it, and Kurito agreed immediately. He made a quick gesture and spoke a spell, then cut a small patch of grass again. Andre's face looked stunned. Curious, he asked what it was, and, excited by the trick's effect, asked him to do it again. Unable to contain his admiration, he watched Kurito skillfully mow the grass, and said his magic was so fascinating it could be watched forever, and Kurito was pleased, and when fertilizer was mentioned, Andre showed a sack, and the boy thanked him sincerely. Approaching him, he asked for help pulling weeds, saying he had brought the necessary fertilizer. Furedo, surprised, asked how this had come about. He said he would give the fertilizer for free, noting the other man's ability to switch sides quickly, and his friend replied that it was a fair deal. Kurito understood and added that for a sack of fertilizer for a 3 by 4 plot, he would agree to work that plot. But Andre said that was too little. And the other man, with a slight sarcastic smile and calm, insisted it was an equivalent exchange. Kurito laughed, explained it was a joke, and promised to handle the situation, but warned they would have to mow their fields, which surprised Andre. Andre thanked him for the help and admitted it was really hard work. Kurito said there was still a lot of work ahead, and Andre joked that only Stella was working and that love is evil. Even if it seems like a joke, negotiating with merchants always takes a lot of effort. Kurito calmly assured that everything was under control. Remembering Emilio, he realized he had not yet met real merchants. Around such people, peaceful rest would be impossible, but he simply could not change the situation. Transported to another world, He arrived in a village and met a family that was always ready to help, and when he realized how valuable their kindness was to him, he decided to find a way to repay their selfless support. He promised he would handle the matter himself because they accepted him and immediately welcomed him as one of their own. After the Onra's family taught Kurito to tend their field, he repaid them with his spatial magic to help mow the grass. But he still feels that is not enough and wants to show more gratitude. So after finishing skilled work on his small plot, he decides to take a short break. Kurito, tired of endlessly mowing his employer Andre's lawn, nevertheless enjoyed a satisfying dinner. He looked over his work and smiled, sure the job was finally finished. It looked like a real vegetable garden. He enjoyed discovering how satisfying it was to do something different from his main job. The lack of physical activity was already showing, so he decided to call it his hobby. Someone behind him noticed he was gardening and offered a pleasant compliment. The elderly people he gave the money-filled letter to. Taylor's mother explained that at the first meeting, they had not even been introduced. Greg's father believed the traveler would never ask the names of ordinary villagers, but Kurito apologized for that behavior. Angelica and Griff introduced themselves. Kurito bowed and said he had not seen them for a long time, and apologized for the late greeting to the neighbors. Angelica reassured him that during the difficult move they should avoid extra worries, and Kurito said it was not a problem. Already settled in, he had no problems. The old man immediately noticed he had started gardening. Griff asked what he was growing, and Kurito said he planned to begin with potatoes and onions. Griff sat beside his small garden and explained that to help potato roots grow properly, the bed must be raised, and the boy smiled in surprise and gratitude and promised to follow the advice, while Griff did not stop there and handed him a sack, saying another pleasant surprise was inside. Kurito asked what it was, and learned it was a token of thanks for the completed task and a housewarming gift he could use as much as he wanted. Angelica handed him another small pouch and said it held butter and cheese. Smelling the magical aroma, Kurito wondered if their generosity was a bit too much, and if the containers were all right. Surprised, he asked if Mr. Griff had really made them himself, since his family was known for making high-quality kitchenware. After reading the note saying only a true master could create such beautiful plates, he thanked Mr. Griff sincerely and promised to always cherish this priceless gift. The old man smiled warmly in response. Mr. Griff instantly became serious and said it was nothing, but Angelica noticed a slight discomfort he quickly denied, and Kurito, seeing how well he could look sad, guessed he might not know how to show kindness, so he soon asked the old woman if she had cows or sheep, and she smiled and said she did. She explained they had many sheep at home, and the food she cooked for him was made from sheep's milk, so he pictured her as a real shepherdess, smiled and said he was thinking about livestock farming, and she advised choosing sheep because they reliably provide milk and wool. She pointed out they could be used for meat. The boy, a little surprised, said they probably could. She suggested thinking it over, and he said he might, though he did not plan to raise them just for meat. Angelica returned home and said goodbye to Kurito. Kurito, smiling warmly, thanked her again and gave a friendly wave. Kurito prepared a small lunch, noticed the incredibly tasty butter and cheese Angelica had given him, and enjoyed the dishes Griff brought. In this world, everyone had a role. Not just Griff and Angelica, but Andre fished in the forest while keeping his village safe. Meanwhile, Stella and Nina worked tirelessly in the fields, growing a wide range of crops. Everyone there had unique abilities that let them work together like parts of a single machine without any supernatural power, so he decided to try to learn similar skills. If you could do one more thing to help this world. That morning, Furedo unexpectedly received guests. Still yawning after sleep, he stepped outside when the village elder appeared on the doorstep and warmly greeted him, "Good morning." Surprised by the meeting, Furedo addressed her by his full name, but the elder gently asked him not to be so formal. After apologizing for arriving so early, he said he'd already settled in and asked if there were any complaints. Fiorito immediately said he was pleased with everything. The air was clean, the food was tasty, and the people very friendly, but the elder noted it was hard to see any pleasure on his face and asked what was wrong, and Fiorito answered, "Why do you think so? Please tell me honestly." Yesterday, Angelica and Griff visited him, and the village head said he would handle their case and that the gifts had been very useful to him here. But despite his joy, he still felt somewhat confused inside. He wondered whether he could somehow help the village get the doll back, aware that his life was split between two worlds. He realized he could not stay here forever, and that his place among the villagers felt less important. Even after finding his role, the thought that he accepted support without giving anything back weighed on him, and the elder, hearing him, admitted he welcomed Kirito's wish to help their village. Leroy warned him not to rush, which made Kirito look surprised. The village head explained they live in a remote rural area with few people, no shops, and almost no free time. Even their own children leave the village to settle in a big city. Kirito recalled that Taylor and Greg had both gone to the capital to become adventurers. That was not surprising, since young people always seek change, while he had chosen a quiet, comfortable life. He wondered whether it was fair to compare himself to those who had recently left home. Smiling, he said he had been the first to travel from the capital to the village, which surprised the young man. The head explained that this had brought true happiness to everyone, because otherwise Angelica and Griff would never have visited him, which impressed the young man even more. They said they were glad to see a young man settle here for the long term and advised him to keep a clear mind. Kirito admitted to himself that he no longer felt young and decided to simply enjoy life, and at that moment his father's words came to mind. Still incredibly happy to be living in the village, he sincerely thanked the village elder for his support. Walking past the fields, Kirito realized he should have followed the village elder's advice to find something to do, and admitted the elder was right. A little farther on, he noticed a small building, a glass greenhouse where juicy tomatoes ripened. Coming closer, he recognized the vegetables and saw they were tomatoes, but no farmer was nearby to tend them, which surprised him. Kirito loved tomatoes and was about to buy some when an unexpected thought crossed his mind. Kirito noticed the vegetables had an unusual onion-like shape and an appealing color that suggested they were incredibly juicy, and someone suddenly called to him from behind. Just as he turned to answer, a shovel was pressed to his throat. Kirito gave a piercing scream, and the stranger, tilting his head so his eyes were hidden, warned him not to approach them without his permission. Looking up at him, he said firmly that he would send him to jail for stealing his tomatoes. A man with a distinctly rural look sternly told him to leave, accusing him of stealing tomatoes, and a surprised Kirito asked again who was really at fault, to which the man said there was no one else responsible. He said it was just a misunderstanding because he had just noticed oddly shaped tomatoes. Then the man asked again who he was, saying he had never seen him before, and asked whether he was a villager. And Kirito said yes, he was from a village, and gave his name. And the other man nodded in understanding. Kirito realized this was the same guy who had moved here from the capital. He asked how the man had recognized him. The man said it was foolish to leave a thriving capital to settle in the middle of nowhere. He added that if he had been older, he would have seen it at once. But Kirito was about the same age. Kirito noted the man had a sharp tongue. He began to explain that the capital's wealth did not make it perfect, saying the city was full of people and buildings but short on nature, and added that he preferred the calm of country life, which surprised the village boy. Despite being from the capital, he was easy to talk to and didn't try to act too cool. Kirito smiled and said he understood him and that people now either praised or criticized him. Apologizing for mistaking him for a thief, he said there will always be people who take things without permission, which surprised Kirito. He stressed his dislike of formalities and immediately asked the other person how old he was. He said he was. The other man was surprised and said he could not tell at once because he had heard that before. Then the man explained that Kirito was only a year younger than Andre, but already seemed older, and asked not to mention it in Andre's presence. Kirito realized the man knew Andre and noticed he had not even introduced himself. Introducing himself as Elga, he said he grows tomatoes, and mentioned he first came to the village when he was 22, which made Kirito frown. He hadn't realized there was another man his age in the village, and it might be more fun with him. Kirito answered eagerly, saying he had always wanted new friends, but young people were rare here. Elga offered his hand, saying they could get to know each other better, and they shook hands. Looking at his hand, he saw it was covered in dirt. Elga said the prank was brilliant. Trying to keep a straight face, the man said it was extremely funny. Realizing Elga was a true prankster, he immediately apologized to Kirito. Thinking he could find common ground with that little rascal, he washed his hands in a bucket and asked which tomato varieties she was planting. Someone said in surprise that they were just ordinary tomatoes, and Kirito replied firmly that they were not ordinary at all, and added that he wanted to know what the other person thought ordinary tomatoes could be like, which surprised Elga even more. He said he only knew the tomatoes they grew, and that he only went to the next village to sell because he never traveled farther. Goran began to see that food transport in this world was far from ideal. Without cars or planes, all the varieties would spoil on the trip, and dangerous monsters roamed the roads. Algo, not a fighter, did not take big risks. He asked Elba for a tomato to taste, and Elba, without hesitation, picked one from the full wagon and said it was already ripe. After thanking him, Kirito noted that the tomato was quite firm and looked perfectly ripe. Kirito couldn't stop stroking it, enjoying its incredible smoothness, but Elvin called him over. With restrained seriousness, he told him to hurry up. The man smiled, agreed, and bravely took a bite. The boy said with delight that these tomatoes were much sweeter and tangier than the others. Elga looked at him and asked if there was anything wrong with that. Satisfied, he said the flavor was incredible, even sweeter and richer than any other tomato he had ever tasted. And Elga, smiling in surprise, understood his delight. He said he had already reached that conclusion, but chose to consult the man from the capital. Kirito watched closely, assuming it was only a joke. Still, everyone appreciates when their efforts get proper recognition. Kirito's words were partly true. These tomatoes had an unusual shape that set them apart from ordinary ones. Their juiciness and flavor were distinctive, with sweetness and acidity perfectly balanced to deliver an exceptional taste. Elga poured her heart and soul into growing them. Elga could not see their potential because his own limits kept him from grasping their full greatness, and he felt those limits were unfair. His thoughts covered not only Elga's tomatoes, but also their origins, and that especially offended Kirito. Elga unexpectedly interrupted Kirito and asked what was wrong. Kirito replied with a question, disappointed by the fairness of the situation, and said the tomatoes tasted incredible, and he did not want many people to try them. Elga paused and shared his view. Then Kirito added that he wanted everyone to enjoy the taste personally. And only when Kirito realized such a unique variety should be marketed as an exclusive brand rather than sold widely did Elga become shocked and beg him to stop, because his words were starting to scare him. Even as he said it, everything seemed impossible. Kirito explained that if they could sell their goods in a big city, he would not have to worry about finding buyers. He believed that would bring a good profit, and that people would gladly enjoy his tomatoes, creating real happiness for everyone. Elga replied that if it were that simple, he would have done it long ago, and pointed out that Goran is in the middle of nowhere, so those ideas are just empty dreams. Kirito disagreed, certain the situation was far from hopeless. He claimed he could distribute his tomatoes across the country. Elga doubted it and said it was impossible. Kirito insisted it was doable, but as he was about to tell more about himself, he went quiet and fell into thought. He saw it as the perfect chance to contribute. He said it was much faster to show than to explain. Next, he asked Elga whether he would still go to the capital with him if he could not move instantly. Elga, surprised, asked what it was about. The street was filled with true beauty. Someone strolled gently, filling the air with the melody of their song. The celebration was full of joy, and among the guests shone Miss Kashi, an experienced senior member of the Adventurers Guild, pleased to finally enjoy a well-deserved day off. Gold had shown a lot of energy since Kirito became popular as a transporter. After his departure from the guild, many adventurers complained, but Gold's calm manner kept the group steady. Feeling she deserved a full day off, she decided to step away from the stressful work. Smiling, she went to the ice cream vendor and ordered her favorite cold treat. Elga suddenly appeared right in front of Kushi, startling her, and Kushi demanded to know what they were doing there. Then Kirito joined in, asking what business Elga had here, and as the two argued about who was right, Elga, terrified, could not understand what was happening. The grand, monumental building turned out to be Zella's real castle, and listening to their conversations revealed he could move freely between the capital and the distant countryside, making him deeply curious about who he was. She turned to Elga and asked, "You're his friend?" Elga was surprised, since it was the first time he had met a being that was part human and part beast. The girl introduced herself and explained she worked for a guild that was always looking for new adventurers, so if he was interested, he could stop by. Slightly embarrassed, Elga agreed to visit. When Kirito realized how pleasant the girl was, he decided to bring Elga back to reality by asking what had happened to the tomatoes. Pushing Elga forward, he said he was only showing his magic, and Kashi watched them go, puzzled. Then she turned to Kirito and invited him to stop by, saying he would always have a place in their guild, and smiling, Kirito promised he would visit soon. They vanished into the air in an instant, and Kushi only gave them a quick glance. Standing firm on the ground, Kirito decided to explain everything in detail, hoping Elga was convinced. Kirito added that his magic made distance no problem. Elga exhaled with relief, confirmed that, and then asked for time to gather his thoughts. He said he could move to the capital, but the real issue was where he could sell them. Kirito said he worked for a prestigious trading firm and had strong connections with management, and that thanks to space magic, there was a special storage that kept produce fresh no matter the amount. Helga was impressed by Kirito's success and asked whether his tomatoes would find buyers in a big city, and Kirito gave a clear explanation. It was surprising that Elga, suddenly humble, began to fear the royal capital, and angry she told the boy to be quiet, then turned to Kirito with clear displeasure and demanded to know why she should allow him to take whatever he wanted in the capital on his own. If such an action could bring wealth to their village, they should try it. Elga looked at him in surprise. He declared his love for the village and his desire to be useful to it. Despite being an outsider, the villagers accepted him as one of their own. And although help might seem unnecessary, he could not stop trying to make things better. Speaking seriously, he told Elga again that he would distribute the vegetables from Gore and Cellar not only in the capital but across the country, and asked the boy to trust him. After thinking about the offer, he blurted out a request to be seduced, which shocked Kurito. In response, Elba decided to repeat his requests. Convinced that Elga could sell everything, he immediately supported the idea because he had no doubts. After some persuasion, Elga agreed to his proposal and gave it a chance. He said he wanted to see if there would be demand for his tomatoes in the royal capital. Kurito smiled warmly, but the other man kept talking. Kurito explained that money was his main motive, since you cannot earn much in the village, and the villagers needed the funds. He smiled nervously and said that was why he agreed. Then, with a sympathetic sigh, he confirmed he was right, and Elga said the deal stands. After they shook hands, Elba said the other could count on him, and Kurito replied that he entrusted everything to him. Remembering their first handshake, he asked whether any dirt had stuck to his hands again. The young man said he had not brought any, as if recalling how Kurito had gently held his hands. While drawing water from the pump at Nino's house, she noticed someone approaching. He drew her attention, and she immediately saw Kurito greeting her warmly. Asking where her parents worked, he learned they were busy in the garden. Lena called them right away to say Kurito had come by. Purito apologized for distracting them from work, and Andre said it was fine and wanted to know what had happened, even thinking they might need gardening advice. But Pareto said it was something else, and then explained the whole situation. People were surprised to learn Kurito planned to sell the village's farm produce in the capital. One man said it was a great idea, but insisted the harvest would sell because it was plain and ordinary. Kurito strongly objected and said his products were far from ordinary. He talked about an onion he had recently tasted, and proudly said he had never come across one so sweet, adding that there was nothing like it anywhere in the capital. And Andre thought he was exaggerating, but the young man firmly disagreed. It may sound presumptuous, as if he were a true expert, but the harvest in that village was too good for Rot to earn from the surplus, and he did not know the exact amount of potatoes. Yet since they were easy to grow, the supplies stayed steady, and their taste showed they could become a staple food. He looked around the room and said that if that was his opinion, they would not object. It was announced that Elga's tomatoes would soon join the business, and that selling more vegetables, dairy, meat, and other products would help the village prosper faster. Andre asked if a meeting with the company's representatives had already taken place, and Kurito said the introduction had happened very recently. Nina inquired whether they planned to sell Elga's tomatoes and received a positive reply. She said enthusiastically that she adored Elvita Meadows. Kurito quickly realized she was not involved in the negotiations, but still tried to offer her some support, replying that he liked them too. Remembering he had worked at a trading company, he decided to find out which product he wanted to offer. Ferredo confirmed he had worked for Emilio's company and said these products could be sold successfully in markets and restaurants. He remembered hearing about the company's great influence. Curious, Kirito asked what he could say about it. The other person said he only knew a few facts. Random traders spread rumors about a company that was rapidly gaining momentum. If Kirito's magic was truly behind it, everything began to make sense. Kurito denied this, saying his role had been minimal and that he did not even know anyone in the village who had heard of the company. Andre said it was inspiring to see such a large organization overcome those challenges. Kurito then asked what impression it had made on Andre and whether Andre would allow Kurito to sell his harvests. Smiling, they said they fully relied on him. Stella added, it would be a good boost to the family budget. Andre admitted it might sound a little humiliating, but stressed they have a surplus harvest every year. Chirito thanked them for agreeing and said he wanted to know which of their crops they were truly proud of. They grew only a few crops, but knew people who had many useful plants, so they invited Kurito to visit. Kurito gladly agreed and said it would be nice to go. Together they visited the neighbors and tried a variety of fruits and vegetables. He said their collection was impressive and more than enough. Everything tasted so good it was almost impossible to choose, and presenting everything at once made no sense because they first had to reach 1 million sales or the business could not be saved. Remembering his face, he decided it was time to follow his advice. Thanks to that support, he built the largest company in an incredibly short time. When there was no personal gain, he still spoke openly or refused, despite their friendship. That was the kind of man he was. He knew the meeting with him tomorrow would decide everything. Outside, the weather was beautiful, and the sky was almost cloudless. A tireless, beautiful maid worked in the luxurious mansions. Appearing behind the girl, he announced his return, and she turned to meet his steady, determined gaze. She greeted him as Mr. Kurito, and he, surprised, said she adapted quickly. She added that she could not become the head servant if she stayed constantly surprised, and Kurito thought to himself she had found her true calling. Video asked if anything had happened while he was away. She said no, and explained that Mr. Emilio left no messages. Then Tiarito added he had business with Mr. Emilio and planned to visit the company, hoping he would not be too busy, and Elsa reassured him that Kurito had no reason to worry. He sat in the living room, and as soon as he saw Kurito, he smiled warmly and greeted him. The boy, thinking he was home, asked in surprise what the stranger was doing there. Emilio said he had decided to stop by briefly on his way back, and Kurito added that he had known when he would return. The boy treated it as an ordinary situation, but Emilio was not surprised by his arrival. Then Emilio asked whether he liked living in the village of Goran. Smiling, he said he had enjoyed his time there in a way he never could in the capital. Explaining the place gave a real feeling of relaxation, and Emilio replied thoughtfully that, although he was still in good physical shape, he would gladly spend some time there, while Kurito asked not to be called old, and Emilio smiled, admitting he was indeed a sensitive older man. Then Kurito moved on to business and said he planned to sell something in the capital, which interested Emilio because he rarely saw Kurito bring anything, and Kurito said he could show the goods right away. Kurito took the harvest from the storeroom, and Emilio asked, curious, what it was. Kurito said it was a gift from his home village. The boy had barely turned to leave when Kurito stopped him. Kurito said angrily that he had just put it up, explaining the product was excellent. Emilio replied that it was just a common crop, and, looking worried, added that the villagers themselves had asked for it, pointing out that in that case he would be turning down the order himself, because even if Kurito had asked, it would not be in the company's interest. Kurito grew serious and said he had not brought them at anyone's request. Kurito insisted the goods would sell and promised he would never betray Emilio or the villagers. Emilio sighed, admitted Kurito was right, and apologized sincerely, explaining that every item must be checked in person because that is the key to a successful business, and interrupting someone before they finish presenting their product is very rude. Kurito said with steady confidence that a preference for taste was the highest value and always the main criterion, and whatever he said, only taste truly mattered because that quality had the greatest power to persuade. Luckily, He chose to taste the food. If the first impression was positive, the rest of the dishes would win approving reactions. They needed to start with raw vegetables. Puerto had already served sliced vegetables, and Emilio, impressed by the careful preparation, decided to try the onion and boldly took a piece into his mouth. Instantly, a real shock overwhelmed him. Kirito was pleasantly surprised by the extraordinary sweetness of the summer treat that melted instantly in his mouth and confirmed it with a smile. He explained that cooking it slowly until it softens makes it even sweeter, and it can also be roasted or flavored with a pinch of salt. He added that he had brought it with him, and the boy admitted the dish was indeed skillfully prepared. Emilio took another vegetable and said he would try it, laughing as he jokingly called himself a tomato sommelier, which made Kirito think he looked like a typical merchant. Tomelo tasted a tomato and was surprised to find it sweet and tasty, like a real fruit. Ferredo nodded, thinking about what he liked best. Emilio explained that these tomatoes were completely different from the watery, sour ones sold in their neighborhood. They had a rich, lovely flavor that perfectly balanced sweetness and tang. Ferredo decided to hold back any comments that might turn into a full review. He had promised to call Delsa so she could make soup from those tomatoes. One of the guys warned him not to overdo it. Then he asked Kirito to move on to the next tasting and added that the boy seemed to be getting really excited. Kirito replied by asking his companion if he liked it and if the product would find a buyer. After finishing the tasting, Emilio apologized again for his harsh words and explained that he could never mistake the right product. The harvest from the village of Roga was truly high quality and, with well-organized sales, could bring significant profit. Just as Kirito was about to speak, Emilio assured him he had brought an exceptional product. With his hand on his heart, Emilio promised his company would take on selling the horror harvest and rural goods, invited Kirito to help design the sales strategy because the expansion would mean a lot of work, and Kirito agreed readily. Days later, Andre went to his post, confident everything was proceeding as usual and nothing out of the ordinary was happening. Suddenly, Kirito appeared before him at a distance and greeted him, and Andre, scared, sharply aimed his spear at him, but the boy shouted that he was Kirito. He recognized him and warned him not to scare people like that again. Kirito apologized, saying it was his shift today. Remembering Alina's reaction, Kirito stepped back a little. Soon, Andre noticed he had not been seen in the village for a long time and asked what had happened. The young man said he was in the capital to sell the crop that had been given to him. Unexpectedly, he began asking how it had gone and would not let the other speak, so Ferredo asked him to let the other explain. And Andre, nodding, calmed down a little. Then Ferredo said he understood his keen interest but suggested gathering everyone at the central square. And Andre said he would ask Stella and Nina for help, which surprised Ferredo. People gathered around the central square, stunned and talking about what had happened. He had not expected so many people, and then realized they had come with their families, which made him wonder whether the harvest mattered that much to them. And he began to worry, as if preparing to present to a large company, when someone shouted behind him. Elga, eager about his harvest, began asking Kirito a series of questions. Kirito told him to calm down first, and then he would explain everything. Elga admitted that all the talk left him restless at night and unable to sleep. At that moment, someone asked him to stop teasing and called him brother, which made Kirito squint in surprise. Elgar introduced them, calling her his sister Mira, and thanked Kirito for helping his brother. Kirito admitted he had never heard of her. and Elgar explained that she looks after the tomatoes, smiling. Kurito said he was pleased to meet her, and Elgar whispered in his ear that she was one of the few unmarried women in the village. Someone slapped him on the cheek and said it was not his place to decide, and Elvis added that it had all been a joke. Soon, Nina came up behind Kurito smiling, and the boy, surprised, asked what had happened. Pointing to those present, she said she could no longer wait, and Kurito said it was time to get to work, apologizing to the entire gathered community for the inconvenience before continuing to report on the agreement's results. Kurito found it hard to open up about the topic, but being trusted with such an important task in front of a complete stranger, he did everything he could and kept going with his report. He explained that their harvest never made it to store shelves. Everyone was stunned and soon began talking, but the surprises were only just beginning. The problem is not that it cannot be sold, but that it cannot be put on store shelves. Alga asked what he meant, and Kurito said he would explain. He begins recalling the conversation with Emilio, who had asked if Purito was familiar with the goods for sale, and Purito replied confidently that he was, explaining the stock was mostly seafood and rare monster meat, then looked at Emilio in surprise. He realized this was what his companion had agreed to, adding that they did not sell agricultural products because those can be bought anywhere. The royal capital has no port, so supplying fresh fish and shellfish is impossible, as are rare delicacies in high demand. The city is full of farms selling ordinary meat and vegetables, but their offerings do not meet the needs of a new trading company. The market was already entrenched, so it was simply unprofitable to try to compete for it. If they launched the product under their own brand, it wouldn't find buyers. Most people wanted things that were both cheap and tasty. That's why Emilio refused to work with vegetables. Kurito saw the niche was already taken and warned the attempt might fail. His friend cut him off, saying he had only been talking about how difficult the situation was, not that success was impossible, which made Kurito look surprised. Emilio said they did not have to sell them at the market because they could supply restaurants in bulk. Confused, Kurito asked for clarification, and Emilio continued. High-end restaurants catered mostly to noble and royal clients, and he explained there is an event where all trading companies sign contracts with restaurants, adding that although he already held a contract only for seafood supply, selling these vegetables there would expand the contract's coverage. Video's branded vegetables had earned a reputation and consumer trust. Taste, freshness, and quality played a major role, but even Kurito's magic could not change that. Emilio noted that while it was a good start, it was not enough to reach the goal. I explained to him that other reliable companies with contracts also had significant potential. Although they have broader market coverage for vegetables and other everyday goods, no one chooses them. Of course, giving up familiar suppliers would be very difficult. That made the restaurant situation harder, so they needed a bold advertising campaign to make the other companies almost invisible. And they could also run a tasting show. He was right. In the capital, you cannot impress people with huge vegetables. So he began to pursue it seriously because it would be unfair if he could not come up with something original himself. While thinking about the advertising strategy, Elsa interrupted him by asking if he would like some tea, and a brief look at her sparked an unexpected but very interesting idea. His gaze landed on Elsa, and he realized she was the best choice to secure success. To sell top-quality products to elite restaurants, Kurito attended an event where all the suppliers gathered, carrying a carefully worked-out secret plan, and someone approached the restaurant representatives, asking them to come out one at a time. Chefs, a variety of dishes, and aromas wafting from every direction filled the space. The girls invited guests to a tasting where they presented Emilia's products. A very large crowd had gathered, and people began asking if Emilio sold more than fish products, with one person wanting to know what clothing was on offer, while others said they were just curious. A companion approached Kurito and called his move a great PR tactic. Kurito replied there really was a chance of success. The companion admitted Kurito had surprised him, since he had not expected such an original approach, and Kurito only smiled softly. Because he had not done much, he thanked the girls right away. The day before the event, at the crucial moment, Kurito suggested getting Elsa and the other girls to help promote the vegetables and asked how they felt about it. Emilio and Elsa looked at him in surprise. Barris asked him what they planned to do, but Kurito, feeling guilty, sighed, apologized to Elsa, said he should not have mentioned it, and asked her to forget everything, pointing out that such behavior resembled harassment and could have negative effects on future unrest. Emilio asked what was wrong with that. The other man smiled, slightly embarrassed, and replied that it was a rather unusual idea because he had not expected his friend to come up with anything new, and Kurito explained that he was still at the peak of his abilities. He said it was not a bad idea because most chefs are men, and if served by attractive women, they would be more willing to agree. Fiorito asked if this could be justified to secure contracts with prestigious restaurants when Movis was not involved. Emilio added that noble people and members of the royal circle do not attend such events because they belong only to their own social circle. Companies are desperately searching for higher quality ingredients and better deals. Underground, a real hunt has broken out, and even the banquet guests were drawn in. Kurito was very surprised by this turn of events. That would probably not be enough, he said. Kurito made his case and suggested wearing his homeland's national costume to serve the guests. He showed interest in his homeland in the Far East. Kurito nodded and said such things were rare in the capital, so they would certainly attract attention. He explained that for certain reasons, he could not move back to his native town, so getting there would be very difficult. However, Kurito still remembered the general look of the clothing and could make it by traditional methods. They agreed it all sounded very tempting. Emilio proved especially useful in those situations because he never questioned the details. Glancing at Elsa, Emilio said they first had to get their consent, and Kurito agreed, noting they had not managed to get permission. Kurito agreed, saying all he had to do was change clothes and serve the company's clients. It was no different from their usual duties, so they reassured him everything would be fine, and when he asked again, he was told once more that everything was in order. He said that based on what they had heard, they could help Emilio's company that way, and she added that Mr. Caristo almost never asked them for anything, but they were always ready to be there in hard times. She said she would be glad if he trusted her more, but Kurito was surprised before he could say anything, and Emilio pointed out that she couldn't decide for everyone, while the curious girls were already standing in the doorway, listening to their conversation. Many wondered what Mr. Kurito's traditional costumes looked like, how they differed, and what charm they held. He turned and said firmly that he agreed. Emilio smiled warmly and said the decision had already been made. Kurito then said he had a different idea. Explain that this decision will add variety to the dishes they served. One cook noticed the unusual onion. It was huge and exceptionally sweet. Another said the tomatoes were so tasty and juicy they could be eaten plain. Some even asked for an extra serving. Kurito's plan to bring the girls to the tasting succeeded. His friend noted that only tasting the vegetables would reveal their full greatness. He also said he was curious to see how Kurito's secret plan would play out, and asked everyone not to give in to any pressure. Elsa quietly came up behind the boys and sincerely apologized for being late. Just as Kurito tried to reassure everyone that everything was fine, her sudden arrival surprised him. The samples were ready and had to be handed to the restaurant reps. Kurito thanked her for arranging it. A middle-aged man looked around, wondering where the unusual aroma was coming from. Elsa approached him and offered some vegetable dishes. Seeing this, the man asked what the delicacy was. Never having seen anything like it, he assumed it was just a cauldron stew, but he was wrong because it looked extraordinary. She said it was a traditional dish from one of the eastern countries, a stew of potatoes and pork with leek and tomatoes, and added that all the dishes used vegetables supplied by Emilio's company, which the chef said he was hearing about for the first time. I was surprised by the dish's outstanding flavor and felt it could be a true first course. Its tender texture and delicate taste left a lasting impression thanks to the clear sweetness of the vegetables and tomatoes. This recipe will appeal to true gourmets. A true admirer of their vegetables, he was also interested in the recipe and the prospects for a long-term partnership. And suddenly Emilio, the company director, appeared behind the girls, ready to explain all the details. They started whispering about a prominent man, Mr. Chamonter, owner of a luxury 5-star restaurant and one of the world's top chefs, and people said he avoided signing long-term contracts. So if those products really deserve that reputation, the girls would approach people without hesitation, offer them a taste of the dishes, and explain that the selection included many more options. He stepped aside and watched people enjoying the tasty food and lively conversations. At that moment, Elsa approached him and, clearly delighted, said it was all incredible. He said all the restaurants were eager to sign with Emilio's company because the result exceeded their expectations. She added that the dish offered by Kurito was the deciding factor. He explained that in his country, people mainly value home cooking, and she stressed that the chef showed interest in the recipe, though she said it probably wasn't on the menu. The dish transformed after adding vegetables from the village rig, becoming a completely different culinary discovery. Fortunately, this world had a seasoning similar to soy sauce, and although making it was extremely complex, the cook carefully memorized every detail of the recipe. Tomatoes always ended up in their ragu, even though he later realized the recipe did not call for them. The additions made the dish much tastier and led her to think the flavor was nostalgic. He confirmed and recalled that his mother always cooked when she was alive. Although he disliked tomatoes, her cooking always impressed him with its creativity. Elsa thanked him for helping recreate that special flavor and for all the dishes she made, explaining she could have managed alone, but it all worked out because of his support. Smiling warmly, she said she was glad to help Mr. Kurito, and he looked at her in surprise. Realizing he could not have achieved such success alone, he felt that when his culture produced those results, his presence in the world truly mattered, and knowing nothing should be forgotten. He accepted that, despite hard moments in the past, his many wonderful memories outweighed them. He knew his task was done, and that he had fulfilled his duty as a thief.